All right, folks, here we go. It's Tuesday, May 21st, and this is the Board of Commissioners work session. Let's see, where are we? It's 1 o'clock, and up first we have the Land Use Energy Code Outreach Work Group recommendations. Cindy Hubin is here with Ellen Sassano and several of our community members who've participated in this lengthy and laborious process. So thank you all for coming, and we're really looking forward to this conversation. Take it away, Ellen, Cindy.
Well, I think I'll start.
Okay.
I'm Cindy Hubin. I'm the Community Development Director at Pickens County. And sitting with us, I'll introduce everybody in just a second, but we are...
Is your mic
Microphone?
on? Oh, are they not
Thought
on?
it was.
Take
Okay.
two.
Great. Take two. Cindy Hubin, Pickens County Community Development Director. And with us today are members of our working group, and I'll introduce you to them in a little bit and get into that in just a second. But I'd like to first mention that one of our primary members of our group and on staff, Brian Paul, is not here today. He's got the flu. He came in early this morning and we sent him away. And it's so disappointing because he is our technical person on the energy issues. So I hate to tell you, but we're going to have to rearrange our schedule a little bit here today to primarily start off with the land use issues in your memo. And we have already arranged several follow-up meetings for June 11th and July 2nd, so that we will be able to get into more detail on the energy code information. But also with that, just some purpose and background of today's meeting. You had sent us away in November after our meeting where staff brought forward P&Z's recommendations to the board about these topic areas of energy, waste management, land use, and asked us to go do some additional public outreach. That is what we've been in the process of doing for the last, several months, and feel very fortunate that we've had a dedicated group of people working with us. In addition to the working group that met for over 14 weeks every Wednesday on this topic, on these topics, Ellen and Brian and Zach and I all participated in a number of meetings with different realtor groups and the Board of Realtors. We met with our Caucus roundtable group to, I think only maybe four caucus groups came to that meeting, but we let them know what we were up to with the code amendments and the changes and how it related to their master plan work, as well as we went, I think it was yesterday, to the Woody Creek Caucus separately because they asked us to come and chat with them a little bit about what was going on with these code amendments. And so we have done quite a bit of outreach, and I thank Andre today for the article in the paper today about what we're up to. So we hope that the public's been well informed about what's going on with us. And with that, I wanted to give just a little bit of history and why we were here. As I mentioned earlier, we started the Caucus Master Plan Code Amendments back in 2016. And at that time, we asked them to take a look at a lot of the action items that had to do with climate change and how that fit into their specific caucus areas, renewable energy and how that might work from a site level perspective as well as a neighborhood level. And then back in 2014, the Board of County Commissioners had participated in the greenhouse gas inventory analysis that was done through CORE for us. And as a result of that, in 2017 adopted the Climate Action Plan that relates to a lot of our topic areas today with energy code and land use code changes. And the two aspects of the Climate Action Plan that relate to my department and community development have to do with what we're in control of, mainly with the land use code and the energy code through the building code. So that's what we're primarily working on today. And we're looking at what potential changes could address the greenhouse gas issues, but any changes needed to be addressed by data and the collection of additional information. So you might recall last fall earlier, we brought 2 studies to you. One was an energy study based on 1,000 square foot increments and real data in terms of actual energy use in homes in Pitkin County relative to electricity and Black Hills energy gas. And then we also took a look at the infrastructure analysis that we proposed to you. Gabe Preston had presented that to the Board of County Commissioners and Planning and Zoning Commission. And if you'll recall, that dealt with the use of roadways, impacts on roadways, and on our landfill, as well as looking at zoning and current build-out analysis. So we took all of that into consideration when we started working with our working group. And so with that background, I would now like to introduce our representatives from the working group that I said we're so thankful to have and have worked hard with us to come to these recommendations. And the purpose of today really is to get these recommendations from the working group in front of you. And it will take several meetings, I think, because there's a lot of information and it took us 14 weeks. So we're going to start with that, but I wanted to give, after the round of introductions, I wanted to give this group a chance to, talk a little bit about any thoughts they had and maybe give you a little bit of an overview of some of their thoughts. But I think as a prelude to that, page 2 in the key issue items of your memo, I think it does a nice job of summarizing some of the highlights and key issues. But with that, we had quite the representation on the board with architects, and John Columbus was chosen. He was absent that day, and they chose him to be the representative, along with Bill Harriman, who is our representative contractor and has given us a lot of great insights to the industry, as well as Sam Barney, who works with Hanson Construction and has participated and has a special interest in waste management, I believe, and how we're working on those issues. And Bill Sterling, who's always with us in the forefront of energy and conservation and represents realtor groups in the area. As well as I'd just like to thank Ellen Sassano for being here, long-range planning staff, and Zach Hendricks, who is our senior admin assistant, and happy to say he graduated about 2 weeks ago, and we're very happy to have him amongst us. And I missed back here Claire Sacco, who is our representative from ACRA, and I wanted to say, as part of all of this, ACRA has been very helpful in presenting their special interest study group, if you will, and their recommendations that help kind of guide us through our matrix and some of the important features we needed to think about as we went through the work in the study group. So with that, I'll just let maybe Bill or whomever like to start off and give a little introduction.
Well, we're really a caucus of 5 here today, out of a group of almost 30 who were members of the task force over the course of the last 14 months. Started out with about a half dozen, and it was precipitated by the update of the energy code that you all did last year, which was passed, I think, final approval was in January 2018. And I think, as you probably remember that meeting, there was no opposition. There were no people that were speaking against doing what you all were doing with the update of the energy code. Though, in a way, it precipitated this task force in an interesting way, because around the issues of updating the 2015 County Energy Code were words like REMP, REMP, TDRs, Transfer of Development Rights, GFAR for Gross Floor Area Ratio. Various terms such as those were springing up in the discussions, and that, of course, made a lot of people worried. So the group contained contractors, architects, designers, and ACRA business people, realtors. We even had a member from an HOA and an attorney from an HOA present as well. And it was a very vigorous gathering. And And I would just say in balance that the group in the end just ended on a very positive note, because I think the spirit of the group is that we want to assist the county and the community at large in moving closer to a net zero carbon world, and where we can be, where all these participants can be on the efficient side of things, and making the buildings as energy as much reduction in energy use as possible is. I mean, people are using net zero as if it's a term that they've been using forever. You know, it's just like rolling off our tongues now. And in this, I mean, for example, a lot of people felt like the REMP fund was a fine to be inefficient in energy usage. I mean, that was kind of the purpose of it. And now I think there's a broader understanding about how 3 times the excessive energy use paid for by a REMP fund is then mitigated out in the field, out in the valley, somewhere. It might, most of it in Pitkin County, some of it spills over into Eagle and Garfield because of the unusual political nature of our valley. And almost $12 million in REMP funds have been invested over the last 19 years in programs. And that all came from the REMP fund that you all created. And you know, the kind of high points of what went on is, so the REMP charges, the fee originally was based on a fee from what the costs were for excessive use in 1999. That's 20 years. So there's a proposal to increase that fee. But what came out of the program out of the discussions was that the REMP fee wasn't all that important in the final analysis in a lot of ways. That's brought a lot of money into Corps to do what we've been doing. But number one, we're recommending that the first mitigation is on site with either solar or as Bill says, hydrothermo if it's possible. If that can't be done on site, next is to find off-site arrays and off-site places to be able to invest that. And third down the line is the fee, you know, and I think that's I think a very enlightened attitude and approach to it. And then another big emphasis was on the role of property managers and those managing the properties to oversee them in ways that can give really precise accounting and because a lot of these houses are lived in for less than 3 months of the year, many of these larger houses. And another interesting thing came on this gross floor area ratio issue of sizes. There were, for example, between 1999 and 2018, 317 permits were issued to build a house larger than 5,000 square feet in Pitkin County. Of those, 237 were between 5 and 10,000. 72 were between 10 and 15. 8 were greater than 15. Now just think about those percentages. So I mean, you know, a lot of the discussion in the group was, you know, well, it's like a double-edged sword, you know. Why bother talking about house size? There's not that many of them actually being finally built. On the other hand, if so few are being built, what does it matter if house size were changed? I mean, you know, it went the whole spectrum in the discussions. So one very innovative thing that we're not going to touch on as much today because of Brian's absence is this whole idea of, instead of just focusing on house size, is a whole project BTU budget for each individual permit that's submitted to Pitkin County. And Brian's already working on this in a small working group. And so we want to push that off. We won't get as much into that today because we need his technical skills and the subcontractor he's using that do all those kinds of calculations and stuff. And that was a very innovative idea that just kind of percolated up in this discussion. And then the role of Corps might be expanded so that they're more involved with the permitting process right all the way through that, so that they can consult with the architects, the builders, and everything, and the owners to deal with as much upfront as is possible. Another thing that came up was zoning to accommodate solar orientation. so that you maximize every building that gets built in Pitkin County so that it gets the best use of the sun. And that's not going to be possible in some cases. It's not going to be, you've got the balancing issues of views and sun. And the next thing that was really touched on tremendously was the Tdr program, and John Golumbos and Bill both had a lot of very innovative ideas about that. The Tdr program has I think been one of the most effective programs that Pitkin County has put in place. All you have to do is go out the back door of the sun deck and look back there along Richmond Ridge, and you don't see you can hardly see a single rooftop. They're scattered all over, and the rural and remote program on that interface between the wild habitat and humans, it's been an amazing success. But there's been some creative ideas coming up about how we might manipulate that program, but the general feeling of the task force was less is more, and why mess up something that's working so well to keep the rural and remote concept and yet bring the TDRs into the urban footprint, you know. And then the last thing was landfill. And already the contractors and stuff have these informal programs where they're sharing earth and stuff so that it doesn't always end up at the dump, but goes to another site. And that also addresses the whole issue of below grade space and how you're going to cope with that as well too. But at any rate, I just want to say that in just summary, it was one of the most interesting and provocative and effective community participations in key issues for us. And it's all about saving the earth, and we all want to be good neighbors and be the strongest participants we can be in that.
Great, thanks, Bill.
And I want to add a couple things.
Tell me your name again.
John Golumbus from Columbus Architects, and you know, in your bullet item number 2, it says at a first priority require energy used to be on site. I think the first priority is highly efficient design.
Thank you.
And so from our perspective, we need to approach this from a highly efficient point of view, and which the energy decode does address. But there was many things that we touched on in this working group. And I also want to say something that Bill didn't touch on, but he sort of touched on it. But this group kind of went from hostile or
That's fun.
it went from guarded and you're going to take stuff away to a very constructive and very great dialogue. So I want to say, you know, you guys did a great job with directing that and helping us to, you know, get from a combative point of view, hey, we're getting stuff taken from us, to a true working group. So I just want to say
John,
that.
I wanted to point out that when you include a network of minds from the community, you're always going to have a smarter machine doing the work, right?
Yeah.
So this is great. Really glad to hear that. Thank you for going through the hard part for us.
Well, and community development, Greg, was so responsive to the different challenges and concerns that emerged from the group. They took every single point seriously, don't you think, John and Bill and Sam and Claire? And we found it was a wonderfully constructive atmosphere by the time we got moved away from the rather guarded beginning, as John very aptly described it.
Well, I can't tell you how interesting it was for me to actually be getting calls from the realtors and from contractors thanking me for this process. Yeah, and, you know, you see them on the street or, you know, just in, you know, because it's a small town. And it's kind of a first. And it was a great feeling because staff has worked really hard and we're really proud of the work that all of you have accomplished. And it was brought forward in our memo in a very understandable, readable format. And I really appreciate that, Cindy, and whoever was involved in that, everyone.
Brian, if you're watching.
Brian, if you're watching at home from your sick bed, and having Zach on board to help was really helpful. So I want to thank the whole process.
Well, you know, the way that Cindy and Ellen organized this in these 3 columns and gave one whole column, which was the giant column, to the task force.
And That was actually an idea of one of the task force members. And it brings me to, I would just like everybody who served on the task force to raise their hand so the board can see how many people here really did put their time and effort and energy into it. And Jill's not raising her hand because she's reading. But, and also I'd like to thank Cliff Weiss for being here from the Planning and Zoning Commission to help us relay that information. So, okay.
Thanks. Who's
Did
up
you
next?
guys want to?
Ready?
I got involved with this because I wanted to be involved in the process versus just complaining about the results of code change. And it was very interesting. I'm Bill Harriman from Harriman Construction. And I got involved early on, and I was engaged in the first ACRA meeting, which was a bit contentious. Everybody was afraid. There was a sense of fear of what are we getting. And the communication that was out there from all parties and accepted by Brian, Cindy, and Alan was amazing, and how collaborative it came. But then we had enough people in there that had a broad enough experience of, okay, what are we really trying to do here? And to get more specific than what their bill is that, okay, we want to be energy efficient. And we live in Pitkin County, and it was interesting how, we are unique. We have, county that says you have to be energy efficient, but, you have a subdivision called Five Trees, which is north facing and gets about 2 hours of sun all day long. So there's balances to how efficient every place in the county can be. Red Mountain gets sun forever. They get too much sun. But they don't have any solar capacity. Nobody would let them do that. The other thing that was discussed a lot, number one, was adapting any code change to our geography. Two was the conversation about REMP net zero. Net zero or HERS or all of these valuations of efficiency of a building only pertain to the building. REMP fee only pertains to, in contrast to Bill, the inefficiency in Pitkin County of the functions of the project outside the building. Snow melt, pools, driveways, saunas, or hot tubs, all of that is outside the building. So if you're doing an evaluation of a building and its energy efficiency from the building code, you get the building, which is what you did with the 215 code. But you don't get all of these things that are picked up in REMP fee, and truly because there is no way to measure it accurately, you pay the fine. If you want a pool, you want all this 6,000 feet of snow melt, well, you're going to be this inefficient, so you're going to pay to REMP fee. Didn't solve the problem of efficient building for the whole project, which is what everybody got on board with. And from the realtors to the architects to the builders to just the people who were there, it became evident that everybody in the room and their constituencies were concerned. This isn't a community of I've got money, I'm going to build it, I don't care. That's not what happens here. Clients care, builders care. We want to build good buildings. And that was the point of this group, and it was remarkably collaborative.
Great, thank you.
Great. Thanks, Bill.
I'm Sam Barney, and I'd like to thank Pitkin County for putting together this public outreach. I'd like to thank Cindy and Ellen and Zach and Brian for facilitating the process, and ACRA for making sure that ACRA members were up to speed with what was occurring. This was an incredibly educational process for me, reading the climate action plans, reading the other backup documents that staff put together related to energy use, related to HARES, researching what other municipalities were doing to address their energy use, and relating those topics to our working group. I think that this is a great start. I think that there's also additional work to be done, particularly related to the post-consumer cycle of goods, and additionally the property management aspect that Bill brought up. So thank you all for letting us participate in this.
Thank you.
Can I add something?
Patty?
I just want to add a little something about Sam. I want to thank Sam, just so Sam knows. Sam was recently appointed to the ACRA board. I sit on the ACRA board, and he has brought, at the couple of meetings that he's been to now, every meeting he does update to the rest of the ACRA board members about what's going on with this group and with the construction industry. And it's been a huge benefit and just really informative for the ACRA board members to hear something we hadn't been hearing for forever, maybe. So I want to thank you, Sam, for being that brave soul that sits on that ACRA board and represents the construction industry.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Great, thanks. Who's up next? Ellen, is it you?
Yeah, I just one more recognition, and then we're going to move on to the details. But I wanted to thank Starwood for participating so much in this operation with us and their special interest in becoming as energy efficient as a homeowners association as possible. So Starwood has their own special kind of interest and working group going on and participation with us on this group. So with that, I think we're going to get started on the land use portion of the memo. And let's see what page, Ellen, does that start
I
on?
want to say it's page 9.
Page
in
9?
your memorandum. Does that get us there?
It's actually page
10. It's
10.
actually 10. It's right in front of me.
So Ellen's going to take over.
Yeah, thank you. So as Cindy alluded to, the planning staff, based on data that we received through analysis that was done both on county infrastructure and then on specific energy consumption as it relates to house size, planning staff came up initially with some potential actions relating to land use code amendments and energy code amendments. And we brought those actions to the Planning Commission and the Board of County Commissioners fairly early on and got a response from both the Planning Commission and the Board. And having reviewed these actions and given us some responses, again, as Cindy said, the Board said, go get this out into the community. And so we have, and you've heard some of the responses that we've gotten to date. And the way this matrix in front of you is set up is we have in column A is the action that staff proposed fairly early on. Column B, the second column, reflects the Planning Commission and Board of County Commissioner response that we've gotten to date. It's been actually quite a while since you all have had an opportunity to weigh in. And then the third column, which is gray on this particular page, is the column, the wide column that Bill or someone alluded to that that contains the working group's recommendations. And so just to lay out the matrix, that's how it reads. And I'll start with A and then walk through these land use recommendations and where the working group how they've weighed in. The first one, action A, was to eliminate the floor area exemption for below grade space. And this really came about as a result of information data that we got in Gabe Preston's report relating to infrastructure, county infrastructure, and specifically the landfill. And the fact that excavated materials from construction sites were taking up a lot of the landfill airspace. And so in dealing with the fact that the landfill has a fairly limited lifespan, we hear different reports on what that lifespan is, but I think most recently we've heard 5 to 6 years. We're about 5 to 6 years out before the landfill is at
Without the
capacity.
expansion.
Without expansion. So this was intended primarily to address landfill capacity and also things like the hauling weight of trucks, impacts to roads, but the primary focus was the landfill. And since it was introduced, we have been told by the solid waste manager, Kathy Hall, who you all know, that as a practical matter, that excavated material, primarily soil, earth, is used by the landfill. It is one of the materials that they can clean, process, and sell. So it's actually not one of the products that is filling the landfill to its detriment. It is one of the products that actually is something that brings in revenue. It can be processed and taken out again into the county and reused. So, and then it also has the second function of being used as covers. So this particular action item was eliminated from discussion because we were told that, this really isn't an issue, at least from a landfill perspective. So hence no recommendation in the third column, because we just pulled it off the table and didn't take it any further with the working group. The second action item was, Bill has already alluded to this, Bill Sterling, I should say. So this action is to modify site design requirements to address solar orientation. And the thinking here was that right now we do have development proposals where a house will come in with a driveway on the north side of the house that has to be snow melted to make it function. And so we thought, well, perhaps we could provide more guidelines in our site design requirements in the land use code to try to move things like driveways on the north side to the south side, or make things site improvements to take better advantage of things like solar access. And that doesn't just relate to driveways, but it's also relating to the specific design of a house and how it's oriented. And so the working group said, you know what, this is a good concept, and we believe it has merit. We would prefer to see these requirements perhaps as guidelines rather than requirements. But we also need to recognize that in some cases, some lots just can't benefit from orientation for solar access, as we've already said. So site design guidelines should be incorporated as a checklist, because there are just going to be some sites that can't take advantage of solar, as an example. The orientation should consider design for both the interior and exterior use, siting of home, driveways, spas, etc. And then, okay, so as a practical reality, many homes are designed with views rather than solar access as a priority by the owner, the client in some cases. And so is it possible to address both objectives? I think that's something that industry struggles with sometimes as a practical matter. And then it was suggested that core be available early on in the site design phase to avoid the cost of several redesigns, which makes sense. We don't know as a practical matter if that's a function that core can provide, but it seems like a good thing to consider. And then the group made the point that front-loading solar orientation in the design process has the benefit of defining the BTU budget for the home at an early stage. People know what they're getting into up front. It was also pointed out that a consistent measurement system for solar access should be established so it's comparable and accountable. Don't know what that would look like, but it's a good idea. And then, as is always the case, whatever system is used, it needs to be simple enough to be feasibly applied. It needs to be simple enough for the public, and it needs to be simple enough to administer. We don't need another complex model or figure to work with. And then finally, consider mechanisms necessary for enforcement to ensure that representations are implemented. Another piece that's always kind of a challenge, but it's important, because if you don't enforce the site design, then it really doesn't serve any great purpose.
A question from Kelly.
Kelly.
Yeah, before we move on to the next action item, I have a two-part question. So do you anticipate that this will run into some conflicts with design guidelines or requirements in the code that try to attain other preferences. I'm thinking about orientation versus like setting a garage as your most street facing or forward component to a house. And so do we need to think about giving guidance on how to prioritize this among others?
I think that's always a challenge in the land use code because we have so many different priorities and community needs and goals. So yes, I think we will be juggling and prioritizing as we go. Cindy looks as
No, I was just thinking that to date, just to remind the Board of County Commissioners, we have no architectural guidelines in Pickens County. And so what we're mainly concerned about is the view from the public right-of-way from a scenic perspective. So just to keep that in mind as we go. But as Ellen said, we've got so many overlapping. I'm thinking when you're saying that, well, what if that affects wildlife, or what if that affects another way that we
Stream
look
setback.
at some of our other priorities. So definitely we're going to have to take a holistic view.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. Thank you. Another question? Did you say?
No, I just was thinking in terms of if you need direction from us in terms of where to manage this priority, or manage this as a priority when these get moved to a final stage.
And if I could just add one more thing. As we go through these, I should have said this up front, these are the concepts that we have to take back to the drawing board. And as everybody knows, the devil's in the details. And we fully hope that the group will help us, vet out what really can work, and that the board will help, obviously, make the tough decisions. So.
Thank you.
Right. These are purely concept at this point. So if I may, I'll move to the next action, which is to accommodate on-site renewable energy mitigation outside of activity envelopes. And this is to accommodate the situation where you may not be able to actually build your home in compliance with our site design guidelines and also get a solar array, for example, within the building envelope. And so the recommendation was that we look at amending the land use code, perhaps being a little more lenient and allowing something like a solar array to be located, and this is just a potential example, on a 30% grade slope, a steep slope where we wouldn't want to see a residence built, but it might be appropriate for something like a solar array. And that's just something I'm throwing out there. It may or may not be something that we implement, but it was just to acknowledge that perhaps we need to give a little more leeway in site design and building envelope development to allow for renewables on site.
So you could call it something like instead of a plain activity envelope, a renewable energy activity envelope, and then but have minimal disturbance to put in that solar array, so you really weren't scarping the whole 30% slope. So it'd have to be adaptive and flexible.
Yes.
We've talked about that for a while.
Yeah, we have. And this group said that sounds like a reasonable approach. And then the second bullet here says also think about allowing additional on-site accessory structures to accommodate renewable energy storage on-site. And another great idea, maybe it's going to look like a barn, who knows, but being able to have storage on-site may be, down the line, a really critical element in providing renewable on-site and reducing.
So you're talking about like the battery packs.
Correct.
That kind of system that Holy Cross is currently looking at, as is Tesla, as we know.
Steve?
I would agree that energy storage is a really critical part of the whole renewable energy equation. Holy Cross Energy is going to be putting in big battery storage kind of things in some locations, and I think there will be more on-site, home-size kind of storage systems coming. I know they're coming. They're being developed. There's different companies working on them. And one thing that I would suggest adding to the matrix and it would go back to actually one of the earlier pages, but it would be one of the options available to a homeowner would be to, for their mitigation, would be to put their money into an energy storage system. And maybe it would be a big one run by Holy Cross Energy, but it would be, I think that would probably be the most efficient system to have big ones like at substations or something. So some homes don't have good solar orientation. They don't have hydroelectric power potential.
Right.
They maybe or maybe don't have a good place for storing any energy, even if they could produce it. So they could buy energy at an off-site solar farm, but if there are none there to buy electricity from at that time, which like right now there are none, everything's bought up, then this would provide another option that somebody could put money into a big battery storage system or a pump back hydro or whatever sort of energy storage things are coming down the pike.
Great idea. We'll go ahead and add that into the mix. Thank you.
Okay, this kind of conversation came up kind of related to, we have an ag building exemption, so it doesn't count against your floor area. And so the idea in this was if you did build let's say you had to build a 10 by 10 shed to accommodate a battery storage, that it doesn't get part of the FAR to the house, it becomes like the ag building exemption, that kind of idea for this point.
And
so
there are several, in my valley, there are several people who are they're off the grid, and they have little sheds out behind their house where they have their battery storage system for their solar collectors. So
Right.
it's not really, they don't build a big barn structure, but it's just more little shed kind of structure.
Yeah, whatever.
But not have it count against the FAR.
Yeah, so that's an important element.
I don't know in their cases whether it had
Right.
to or
That's
not.
interesting,
I'm not sure.
But John's point is well taken, that there was discussion about if there is to be a structure to house storage, that it would be good to have it not count against
it
your
encourages it.
your floor area as an incentive. It should not count. Something to consider, absolutely.
As long as that's the only purpose, right?
As
The
long
sole
as that's the
purpose.
only, if it's a dance hall and
With a heated floor.
storage, yeah, right.
Mother-in-law
so,
unit will
right.
be in the back of it, you said.
And the jacuzzi for the cows will be in the front.
We all know,
Been
yeah.
there, done that one before.
So,
Cattle dip.
Actually, could have been a
So then, that's a good segue for the next item, which is to allow neighborhood-level solar farms as a special review use. And this was thrown out there because, we have had discussion about more industrial size, larger solar farms, and Holy Cross and other entities have talked about that concept. Good concept. It's a little. There's tends to be some pushback given the fact that these can be larger arrays, as an example, and there's concern that they may have some neighborhood impact. So the concept was introduced that perhaps there could be neighborhood level solar farms as a special review use, and that we should establish standards for something at a smaller scale that could exist within a subdivision or a specific neighborhood and could be shared communally by houses, residences in the area. It would reduce transmission distance from a larger array or from a utility line. And so, again, and this is for people who can't provide renewables on site, obviously. So there was general support from the group for this concept. They had some great ideas. They said, maybe the renewable energy mitigation program fees could be used to help purchase land for and/or to develop neighborhood solar farms. Don't know if that's a feasible concept, but it might be. Consider installing photovoltaics on the roofs of shade structures in public parking lots to provide local neighborhood energy sources. another great idea. Don't know if it's feasible, but it's a good thing to consider and throw in the mix. And then there was discussion about a recommendation that a caucus should not be legally permitted to restrict neighborhood-level solar farms, similar to the state statutes relating to limitations on homeowners associations' ability to restrict solar panels. This was just thrown out there, but with the caveat that special review standards really must be designed to address neighborhood impacts if we go in this direction. So that neighborhoods don't feel as though they're under siege and can't have no ability to deal with impacts. The last recommendation actually came from Starwood. Specifically, I think they brought this one in.
It was, yeah.
And they said, you know what? We're a neighborhood that has many homes, and we would really like to perhaps be a model and do the research necessary to see if, as an example, if a neighborhood can accommodate a neighborhood solar array on private land, if there's adjacent public land, that might be an opportunity to work with the Forest Service to see if something immediately adjacent could accommodate a solar array on public land. And so we contacted the Forest Service. Starwood had gotten there long before we got there. And the Forest Service said, yeah, you know what, we do have a permit system that will allow for such an array or comparable renewable system on Forest Service lands under circumstances where installation couldn't be accommodated on private land. I don't know where that negotiation has gone with Starwood. We do have 2 Starwood representatives here today. But we really thought it was a great concept to throw into the mix, and something that they are already exploring and that we might take a little more time to look into.
Patty?
Would that be much like the Forest Service allowing easements for utility lines to cross through federal lands? I think that would be kind of the same provision they look at the federal statute level.
I think you're right. It probably is the same provision.
Yeah, they just tweak it a little bit to allow it'd be some kind of an easement provision provided for renewable energies instead of electric lines.
Yes, there is an existing application available. You can go through a process with the Forest Service today. I don't know the details, but I
They have a great relationship with the local Forest Service, so
yes, we do.
it's a positive.
Okay,
Yes, we
Steve?
do. Any other? Oh, Steve, did you have a question?
Well,
I'm
I
sorry.
would include BLM and state land board land in that same discussion, because there are, especially on some of we don't have that much BLM land, but some of them have really awesome southern exposure and could, or by subdivisions like on Light Hill, for instance, so.
My bad. I used the Forest Service as an example here, but yes, the reference was really just to adjacent public lands that are in close proximity. So
I had a question, if I may, about the, did you speak with the utility, Holy Cross? Are they part of this? Because I know their scheme going forward is distributed renewable energy and storage, and it seems as if you're hand in glove with them. I was just wondering how much participation has there been so far?
Yeah, they've been aware of our group and are now, I believe, on the committee working with Brian and the more technical committee to further these concepts. And yeah, I don't have more to say about
More on that, okay, thanks.
great, thank you. Then Action E was definitely the elephant in the room when we brought it up with the working group. Everybody was waiting with bated breath. And so this action was to reduce maximum floor area countywide to 10,750 square feet. And here while this issue relates more than just energy consumption, there are other repercussions associated with large homes, things like impacts to rural character and several other iterations. We were focused on energy consumption. And as it relates to large homes, we had received the data from August Haas that showed that as house size increases, so does energy consumption on a continuum. It's a gradual continuum, but they do coincide. And so we said, well, should we be looking at reducing house size to acknowledge this trend? And so purely from an energy consumption standpoint, the working group said, really, if you want to get to energy consumption, don't restrict house size. Give us an energy budget. And Bill gave a great summary of that concept, but and Brian Paul will go into great detail about what that could look like. But they said, you know what, and Bill Harriman also referred to the fact that right now, when we look at the REMP fees, they are only addressing exterior use for spas, pools, driveway, snow melt on driveways. And the group said, you want to look at energy consumption, look at the big picture. Look at those exterior uses, look at the home, and as John said, start out with an energy efficient home, and then go to the structure itself, and then go to look at the energy consumption for the interior and exterior uses. And so that was their recommendation moving forward, and I think we all agreed that it's a good approach to consider. And in addition to coming up with an energy budget, and that would generally, and I'm not going to get into Brian's realm because I'm really not capable, but the approach is basically to put together standards that would assign BTUs per square foot in an overall energy budget. And everybody would be given an energy budget, and their energy consumption would be monitored against that budget. And if they were to exceed the budget, well, they might have to pay more. They might have to mitigate. And if they were to consume less energy than their model allowed for in that overall budget, then they might get a rebate. They might get money back. So that I am not going to delve into that concept. Brian Paul has convened a small group of engineers and those who really are well versed in the nuts and bolts of energy and building. And he is, in the event that the board does give us direction to go forward with a model of that type, Brian will be ready to come forward with some recommendations.
Hey, Ellen, I wanted to bring up what John had said earlier and what I had thought of earlier, and we've heard it discussed, is that on this same list, is this not the place where efficiency first would be at the absolute first priority on your bullet points? So really then REMP gets down to number 4. But I think, as everyone has always said, energy efficiency is the best way to save money. There's really no mechanical means you can do that's going to be better than saving it in the first place.
The design of, I
So
think,
number 1 is the design, number 2 is on-site, then off-site, then REMP.
Right.
I think that would make more sense to me.
so, and that is how it should be presented. Thank you. Design first, as John said, as the architect at the table said, design first. That's really an important consideration. And then, offset your energy consumption with renewables on-site as an alternative for those who can't.
Offsite,
And as the planner might add, siding should be number 1.
I
So
was going to add in
siding, then design, then
Part of
on-site.
design, I think.
no, I was going to add to that. It's part of design. Siting is part of the design. When you're building the house, you need to know how you're facing the house and where the structure is going to be as part of your design of the house. So we're going to combine those two, Cindy.
George, did you have something, or were you just
No, I was just watching the clock. I want to make sure we have time
sure we have time to get through it all? Right. Thank
Okay,
you.
I will, I think I just have a few more here, and stop me if you'd like me to just cut my
I think you're
presentation
doing
short.
great.
Okay.
Keep it going.
Good pace.
Okay, so then let's move on to the next,
Hurry up already.
the next action which was, again, it was looking at the Transferable Development Rights Program, and we were saying, you know, when this program was developed, it was intended to preserve backcountry and agricultural lands, and it's really achieved a lot of its initial goals, community goals, in that it's been very successful, as Bill said earlier. But where there's some unintended consequences in that TDRs are used to allow for larger homes above and beyond the 5,750 square foot growth management exemption that exists today. And one can build up to 15,000 square feet using TDRs or competing in growth management. So do we want to deal with that unintended consequence? And one of the recommendations was that we actually require exponentially more TDRs as house sizes exponentially grow. And we'd have a sliding scale, and this group looked at that. Planning Commission and board were somewhat skeptical of this concept, and the working group said, you know what, the TDR program is so successful today. It really has achieved a lot. It's very simple to use, and we think it should. We should really, for the most part, leave it be. And if you do make any changes, make sure that the program remains simple in terms of administration on our side and in terms of use by the public. There was some we had a lot of discussion around
John had
this.
a great, interesting idea.
On this particular one, yes, and I think I've got his idea on the next page. But there was some support for reducing the square footage value of TDRs from 2,500 square feet to a smaller fraction, so that people would be less inclined to use all 2,500 square feet to offset the cost of the TDR. But that said, again, we said, okay, so that's perhaps making the program a little more detailed and complex. But if it can be done and kept simple, perhaps that's a direction to go. Steve?
So I have floated the idea of doing fractional TDRs only to the point of doing a half a TDR for 1,250 square feet. And it didn't gain any traction with the BOCC or with staff because it seemed, I think, too complicated. I just would like, not right today, but if the group could discuss that, I'd really like to see what the people in this room think about that idea, if it's worth looking at any further, or and my reasoning is the same reason. Somebody might not want to build an 8250 house, for instance. They only want a 7,000 square foot house, but they don't want to buy a whole TDR to do that because they'd be wasting. They're not going to build a 7,000. They're going to build the whole 8250 because they had to buy that size of TDR.
And to their credit, this group had a lot of discussion around TDRs. We did go through a discussion about fractional TDRs for that very reason. You know, people are building more than they want to offset the cost or not to. So, and Cindy and I have had a lot of discussions around the TDR provisions and potential changes, and there will be more with you moving forward. I can guarantee that. But thank you, Steve. And yeah, this group had extensive discussion around the fractional concept, and we kind of went full circle in that it was supported initially, and then people said that could get really complicated fast.
We've
So
discussed it at same level many times.
Kelly?
Just a simple question, I guess. Is the anticipation that the cost of a smaller TDR would go down?
Yeah.
That would be,
It's the market.
yeah,
Yeah.
just whatever the market would bear for it.
and that's a good
go up.
question because it may or may not. But that's right. Good point. Good question.
I think this was born out of kind of some of our experience and other architects' experience, where the client starts off saying, I want, 1,000 square foot addition, but then it turns into a 2,500 square foot addition because that's what they bought. And they don't want to lose it. So if they could buy a portion of it, they might not build to the full extent.
Mm-hmm.
And somewhat anecdotal.
Might not, might not.
Might not. And they might get to the 1,000, go, oh, I'm going to buy some more because I want more. It's somewhat anecdotal from our point of view,
Sure.
but that's the idea.
But that might not undermine the simplicity of the program.
It might, it
It
might
might
undermine the simplicity.
It could.
Of the program.
So there will be ample time. The TDR discussion is it's pretty fascinating, but it will take the rest of the meeting if we launch.
We'll pick that up later.
So, if I may, I'm actually going to go a little bit out of order here. Action item I on page 19 also relates to TDRs, so I wanted to cover it before I moved backwards. So this one was develop alternatives for use of TDRs for something other than additional floor area. And again, with the caveat that the group wants the program to remain successful and be simple. I think we've gotten the same feedback from all of you. There were some great ideas that the group threw out. One was to purchase one TDR to allow the restrictions for an existing legal 1,000 square foot caretaker dwelling unit to be lifted and the unit to be used as a guest house. This is actually something that was initiated by one of your planning staff members in the room. And it was to acknowledge the fact that
Who that could have been.
a lot of caretaker dwelling units, really as a practical matter, are not used as caretaker dwelling units. There's a lot of demand for guest houses, and this might be a good proposed use.
Something to talk about.
Something to talk about. And or purchase one or more TDRs to allow a new guest house to be built up to a certain square footage, perhaps 2,500 square feet, subject to zoning restrictions relating to parcel size, special review. So again, just thrown out there, recognizing the guest houses there is a demand for those. Allow a landowner to sell off or bank a TDR if they want to build a smaller home, a 3,000 square foot home, or something at another size significantly smaller than the currently allowed 5,750 square foot home. We'd require placement of a covenant on the property to ensure that property was covenanted against building anything bigger. Great, I think, great creative concept. Don't know if it's possible on the ground and to implement, but and then the question was raised: could a subsequent owner then purchase a TDR if they wanted to build a larger home? Yeah. So how would a covenant deal with that? Would it deal with it? Would it be prohibited? We don't know. And then there was a recommendation that rather than developing alternatives to use of the TDRs for additional floor area, beef up the special review standards for TDR receiving sites to ensure that issues relating to rural character are adequately addressed. You can build a larger home in certain places. If you have the good standards in the code, you can deal with impacts. And then I think this is there were several. We're almost there. Issue TDRs in exchange for reducing density where someone wants to subdivide. That's not a new concept, but it's certainly one we could revisit.
In the rural area, we don't allow it in the rural area for subdivision to get out of growth management right now, but we do in the urban area to encourage TDR use in the urban area.
Yeah. And so this next bullet speaks to allowing purchase of a TDR in lieu of competing in growth management for new development in the rural portion of the county. That's currently not allowed. It was suggested that we revisit that concept. And then this was really creative. Allow sale of a TDR to compensate for a reduction in floor area under circumstances where one chooses to replace a non-conforming larger home at a smaller size rather than replacing at the same floor area as currently allowed under non-conforming replacement provisions in the land use code.
Can you read that again and make it?
Yeah, well, what it means is we're seeing a lot of redevelopment right now, and we will continue to see a lot of redevelopment moving forward, given the age of our homes. And right now, you can rebuild at the same size that you have under our non-conforming provisions, even if the current zoning would require you to build smaller. But if our non-conforming provisions say, hey, you tear it down, you can rebuild at the same size as currently exists. So this was a suggestion that if you were to build smaller,
Right.
you wouldn't be utilizing the non-conforming section, which said you can build the same size. You'd be saying, I want to build smaller, but I want an incentive, and that incentive might be a TDR that I could sell. Does that make more sense?
Yeah, and it puts more TDRs into the market, and we're trying to find a place to market them.
That's the
Right.
next conversation.
That's the next. So again, the TDR issue is complex, and we always have to look at the big picture. And then
A TDR economist will be the next field of study at CMC.
that is a brilliant idea. We should add that
propose
to
that.
the list.
Actually, probably at the lead school of business at CU.
And then this is another, Cindy Hubin, require purchase of TDRs for upzoning. It's something that makes sense, and we've always suggested. The last one, I think this is the one Bill was alluding to, John Columbus's concept that really outside of the TDR discussion, modify the land use code to allow for family compounds or multiple structures on a site to accommodate large family or guest gatherings, recognizing that condominiumization, parcel size, and zoning would all be considerations. That's complex, but it is a suggestion somewhat related to TDRs, rather than using a TDR for a guest house. Acknowledge that sometimes people just want a family compound, and maybe that should be accommodated for in the code. So we had a lot of discussion around TDRs, and with that, I'll move back to the last two. I think we just have two more to cover here, I hope.
Right. And we'll have some time for discussion.
And we will have
Two more meetings.
So the next two concepts were around reducing the growth management exempt floor area from 5,750 to 4,500 square feet. And that was like an eye test. Wow, is that a 3 or a 5? So, so this concept again was born out of the notion that if we reduce the growth management exemption, it will be a disincentive to people as they purchase TDRs to get as big in the end, because they'd have to purchase more TDRs if they were starting out at a lower growth management exempt size. This was not really supported by the Planning Commission, and the BOCC wanted to have a little bit more discussion around this, some more data perhaps, and the task force said, you know what, this is really a disincentive approach. We prefer the concept of providing incentives to do to achieve community goals, and so no, there wasn't really support for either of the actions that relate to reducing the growth management exemption. I think so that I'm not going to go. I think that covers everything, right?
I think you got it.
Oh yeah,
There's
right.
one reducing 5750 to 3750, that one.
Right, I think that it was the same conversation where the reducing the growth management exemption really wasn't supported because it didn't seem to
Same arguments.
really achieve the goals, because ultimately people could purchase TDRs to go bigger. They'd just be purchasing more. Board of County Commissioners said they might like to see more data related to that. So then I think the last one relates to the landfill, is that right? Oh, okay. So the last, or the first, or the second relating to infrastructure, this was looking again at the fact that 60% of the landfill is the space at the landfill is taken up by construction debris, and that's a big deal. So it was agreed that a demolition permit we should put together a demolition, a waste ordinance that addresses demolition and deconstruction and encourages reuse and recycling of materials from relating to construction and so I know that on May 7th, the board had a work session with Kathy Hall, and she introduced concepts relating specifically to an ordinance to address this issue. And she will be coming back. She's working on an ordinance to this effect. I'm not going to go through all of the great recommendations that we got from the working group. They generally supported this concept and had, I won't go through them all, but some great ideas, which I think will be considered in the ordinance. And you'll see that ordinance sometime in the fall, as I understand. So that does conclude my
Can you scroll up a little
presentation.
bit? Just wanted to see there was something about creating a market, which I thought that's pretty way out there. But is that the one? Is that on your page? I'm sorry, I'm looking at this
down.
one. Yeah,
Okay.
down on your. We see
yeah.
it here. You're all wondering why we're staring down.
And I'm
The
happy.
screen right here.
I'm happy to walk through these with you.
let's not do that yet.
I don't want to take all of the time, but there were discussions about a couple of different ways to accommodate, to incentivize use of materials, and one of them was, one, as you know, is at the landfill. There's consideration being given to having a Construction Junction went away several years ago. It was in
Long time ago.
Carbondale. It was a place where you could buy and sell construction materials. There was discussion of having that sort of amenity at the landfill. And then there was also discussion of having an online swap available, generating that perhaps at a county level. Perhaps it would be a private entity that would pull that together, but it would allow contractors, builders, owners, homeowners to have a site where they could see what's available or what would be available from one construction site and allow for some swapping of materials rather than to alleviate hauling impacts and hauling costs for everybody. That was one. And is there another, Craig, that I'm missing?
That may have been what I saw. Let's go down to the bottom of it, but we can let's move on. Get to that later. I think that may have
that'll
been
come
one
back
we
with
meant. We'll
Kathy
come back
and Lee.
around. Yeah.
That will come back. It's a really interesting topic. It's another one we could probably spend hours on, and I'm happy to if you'd like to.
No, we don't have hours.
I think we should open this up for board questions. George.
Oh, thanks. First, I want to really thank the task force. I thought you guys have come up with some great ideas in terms of us really trying to address our long-term challenge, which is climate change. How do we, as a community, how can we reduce our carbon footprint? So, thank you all. There are some great ideas in here. Some could work, some might not work, but it will stimulate the conversation. So I think that's great. A couple things, though. I know today's session was really supposed to focus more on energy and how to address more efficient energy building. But when I look at what we're tasked the staff to do, is more of a holistic approach. And so energy is just one part of the puzzle, right? You've mentioned impacts to roads, impact to landfill, impact to services. And for me, one of the more important things is also impact to the rural character of Pickens County. Because what we're really talking about is not within the UGB. We're talking about unincorporated Pickens County, which extends all the way up to Thomasville to the north and Placita and Redstone out to the southwest. So we need to look at this bigger picture of how we're going to address all of our neighborhoods throughout the entire unincorporated Pickens County. So for me, the BTU idea, I think is great. We've already started that discussion. We brought CORE in a year or two ago to come up with a methodology to look at how do we audit internal energy uses as well as external energy uses. So that's in the process. Landfill ideas, we're talking about that in terms of how to mitigate and extend our landfill. The Tdr program is kind of interesting. It's been successful on one hand. On the other hand, you know, the original intent of the Tdr program was to extinguish development rights in some of those really sensitive areas like backside of Aspen, rural and remote was zoned. And those transferable rights were really supposed to be landed within the UGB. And so what we've seen over the last many years is we're seeing more of those TDRs being landed outside the UGB, out into rural Pickens County, and again affecting all these other impacts that when you live in a rural area, you live out there for a reason. And so the TDR program, I think, needs to be looked at. I don't think it's working that well. It worked well for 30 years, but times have changed, and we're starting to see the impacts as we move throughout the valley. I think the challenge for us, as been stated, is to come up with some guidelines, some land use changes, as well as energy. How do we become more energy efficient? How do we reduce our carbon footprint? How do we maintain our rural character? And for me, that discussion really starts with the what was mentioned earlier, the elephant in the room, in terms of a house size. Because we know from our studies, home sizes over 7,500 square feet, energy use goes up exponentially. We talked about net zero, and the presentations I've heard from different architects and engineers talked about the challenge we have in our environment at our altitude. Net zero may not really be achievable. We may get close, we may look at other models like a HERS, but when you get into these large homes, it may not be achievable. You could say, well, let's look at mitigating off-site. Well, where will that off-site be? Are you going to go out to Nebraska to try to mitigate? So I have concerns about that in terms of off-sites. I think that we can begin to look at dropping our house sizes from 15,000, which was really just an arbitrary number that came up many, many years ago, and look at going down to about 10,000. We cut out a third of our impact right there. The truth of the matter, has been stated, very few homes are being built to that size. In the old days, people wanted to build these large homes because it was a way to gather families together around the country as reunions. We're not seeing that any longer here in our community. As kids grow older, they're sort of doing their own thing, so it's much, much harder for families to get together. And so those large spaces are not being utilized. They're being sat vacant for most of the year, not only taking up enormous energy on site, but all the resources that are needed to maintain those through the property management companies. So I think that's a starting point for me. I think it's a challenge. We have some special interest groups here, but when we did a community survey last fall, 85% of our respondents said it was important to maintain a rural character. 76% of the respondents said that there should be limits on house size, density, location, and type of development. So we're hearing from one group here, which is great, but there's a whole nother constituency that we represent, and that's what we're hearing from our survey. So we have to take that into account as well. I think we also need to take the long view. 50 years from now, what do we want to see our community look like? We need to ensure that we have environmental and economic sustainability. And as our predecessors did at a similar table here, back in the early 70s, as many of you know, it was very controversial. It was in battles when those commissioners first talked about down zoning. Very, very contentious. Special interest groups. But you have to think for yourself whether that was the right thing to do, looking back in the 70s, 50 years. Whether that's really helped our county or hurt it. You don't have to go very far to tell the difference when you enter Lee Pickens County. You can tell immediately. All you have to do is drive past the old mercantile buildings in Emma, and you start seeing what happens when you don't have the down zoning that our forefathers put in. So I would say, as down zoning was successful, I think downsizing will be successful as well as we address some of these issues.
Thanks, George.
I just have one, since I made most of my comments as we went along, but it comes back to when Brian is here, Cindy, when Brian is well and back before us. And it really relates to George's points about house size. And George, he's very passionate, he's very consistent on bringing that up, and we appreciate it because it does a lot in our discussions, because it's always bringing us back to that discussion again. But I think we need to look at the B2, the energy budget, and how that's going to pan out. We have a lot more information on what that actually means and how that can be applied to house size and how we can then mitigate energy use in those bigger homes, if that's going to work, or if not, then maybe the discussion of house size comes back to us with some more factual support to do it or not to do it. So that's the only question I would have moving forward. TDR is another big discussion. I think the ideas that came up, it's what we were asking for. That's what we wanted to hear if it's part of our discussion, because we were running out of thoughts and ideas. So, and we like to look at the ones that may be way out in left field, because, you know what, sometimes those are the decisions, those are the ideas that are going to work. And the landfill, as George said, we're on it. We're working on that to help mitigate the construction waste that comes out. We have to bring the cities involved, the municipalities, because, as we know, so much of that's coming from within the cities and not really within the county. So, there's a lot to do. This is a great start. Again, this format was really, really helpful in trying to vet out this information, because there's a lot of information before us. And we asked for it, and we want it. So thank you.
Steve?
A couple more points that I haven't brought up. One would have to do with excavation of below grade space. I know it says that this has been taken off of the table, but I've always been in favor of allowing more subgrade space in rural areas, where now it's the urban growth areas where it's encouraged. Out in the rural area, it's not been even allowed or encouraged at all. And to me, if subgrade space, you can make the whole house more energy efficient, and it reduces the appearance of the house to make it seem smaller and more in tune with the rural character, keeping smaller houses. And if in rural area especially, the excavation from the subgrade space often can be used right on the property if it's a big enough property, that it's not going to the landfill. But also we should encourage just private sale, like you're taking excavation material from this site and taking it over to another site that needs some land, needs some fill. And that not even take it through the landfill for processing. So I think that this should actually be left in there and have some more thought put into, what we do with the excavation material. And it's maybe more of a landfill issue, but I think it should be considered keeping it in the land use code. In terms of the large house sizes, I've always felt like you could build a 15,000 square foot house that is totally net zero or net positive RMI built their innovation center in Basalt. It's 25,000 square feet, a net positive building. So I know that we can build houses that are whatever size that would be energy-wise would be net zero. But, and George has alluded to the other impacts. When you get a house above a certain size, whether the people are there or not, there is a whole crew of employees who are maintaining that house. They're commuting from Rifle or Newcastle or somewhere down valley to go to that house just as if it's a business to do the maintenance on that, for taking care of the lawn, shoveling snow off the roof, housekeeping, all the different jobs that are done. And thinking way outside the box, if a big house is sort of like has the impacts of a business, then maybe the number of full-time employees who are required to maintain that big house needs to be taken into consideration, and maybe affordable housing kind of mitigation should happen for a house above a certain size. And that's thinking outside the box. It hasn't been addressed here. It's not so much an energy thing, although there is an energy impact of the employees getting from where they live down valley to get to that house. Is certainly a it impacts the transportation system. So a couple more ideas to put in the mix here.
Thanks, Steve. Kelly, anything?
Yeah. Thanks, George. I think I appreciate tying this discussion into kind of our longer vision and discussion about values of where we want to go. And we know as a board that acting on climate change is a high priority for us right now. One of the points we didn't mention today was that, our biggest impact in Pickens County is our built environment, and that's, 70% of our contribution to global warming gases right now. So this is very timely. I think that the discussion is very well centered on how to get at solving that problem, particularly with the topics having to do with site orientation, on-site or off-site mitigation, neighborhood level solar farms. I've had this conversation with Greg about what's the difference of a, brown roof that's been shingled as opposed to a roof with solar panels. Like, what is the visual negative impact to that? Are we moving to a place where that's what we want to see and that's what's more acceptable, which I would hope for. I do want to acknowledge that the discussion about home size gets to other goals and values that we as a board and a community may have. And so maybe moving forward, if we can be as explicit as possible in this conversation about how the home size is related to an energy budget model, because I do think we also need to create a space separately for what does reducing home size help us achieve on other values and metrics. And similarly to the Tdr program, the Tdr, it either closes a gap or provides incentives between what we want for the community and what a private homeowner wants to do. And it sounds like there's lots of topics for a robust discussion looking just at the health of that. And so again, I would just encourage that as we're talking about TDRs, let's really, in the context of this conversation, keep it very focused on how it might contribute to our decisions about an energy budget model. And then just overall, I think for this to be a real success and for us to be a leader as a community on this type of model, I'd like to see a program that is allows for flexibility and creativity and beautiful built environments. These are the places where we raise our kids and create our memories and want to be excited about our interaction with our built environment. So just as kind of an overall, I think, goal for these outcomes. That would be one of mine.
Great, thanks, Kelly. Speaking of our kids are going to be the ones that are going to be living in these houses, and they're probably going to be asking us why we didn't do it smarter, right? right? So I think the thing that separates us from the decisions made 40 years ago, as George points out, and I want to say that I'm with George and Steve and Patty and Kelly on all of this. I'm nodding yes to everything I hear. The difference between what happened 40 years ago with the downzoning is that didn't the consequences of those decisions affected subsets, groups of people, while the consequences of what we're doing here and what we're reaching out to do is really trying to affect all of us in a way that it's equitable, and that the disaster of climate change will be fairly equitable, certainly across our community, if not points beyond. So I think it's great to see the alignment of how this group came together. I'm so enthusiastic and excited about that. I think it's nothing less than a Manhattan Project or a moonshot that we're trying to accomplish here, and it's going to require, you know, a lot of resource use, angst, and creativity on the part of our architects. I wanted to bring up a couple things I pulled out. We can save these for Brian, but I was thinking, regarding vacant home status is one of the big things. If the home is vacant 3/4 or 10/12 of the year, boy, wouldn't it be great to come up with a home we could just shut off somehow? I guess if it's a net zero home, it wouldn't matter, but you still have all of the employees coming in to maintain and replace the flowers and mow the grass or whatever it is. So when we start thinking about mitigating for a large home, or any home for that matter, we do have to include this discussion of the number of people required to keep it going, to make the machine go. And it's different for a large house and a small house, and I think that should certainly be part of the conversation. On the other hand, I want to make sure that people understand my feeling about this is virtually every new house that we build has to reach a conservation energy standard, and if we can go for net zero in the smallest house, it would be just as important to me as with the larger ones. I think everything I was going to say has already been said, so I'm not going to go further. Steve?
I have one more idea, and that has to do with repurposing existing houses. There's a huge amount of energy saved by a person reusing an existing house and just doing a major remodel on it, as opposed to scraping it, bringing in all new materials. And I don't know if that's taken into the equation on the total energy cost of a house that's being built. But if someone
In
does...
the BTU budget you're talking about.
Yeah, in the energy budget. So repurposing an existing building like we did with our building here can really save a huge amount of energy. And I think that should be considered if someone's doing that.
Reduce, reuse, recycle.
Great.
Okay.
Yeah, idea.
So next steps?
I think next steps on this, where do we go from here?
Cindy, do you want to?
No, thank you guys. Those are all great comments. We'll take into consideration when we come back on June 11th to continue the conversation. So I think the first thing we need to do is get through the entire presentation, have Brian here for the next conversation, have us here again, same format, with all of the energy recommendations. That could take the entire 90 minutes, I think, that we're going to have. And then we have another meeting scheduled for July the 2nd, and we'll move forward from there. But what we ultimately need from the board is direction so that we can move forward and put our energy into the code amendments you would like us to advance as priorities. And then also, know that will take a little bit of research and time to get back to you on those specifics with the code amendments. Because as we as a group realized, the concept that we have right now for the energy budget, it hasn't really been done before in the same way. It's going to take some time and technical discussion as well as how does that functionally work in a code, and how is it practical from a measuring and monitoring perspective. So all those things have to come together, not only on those fronts, but also on the legal front. And so we've got a lot of work behind this. So we want to get through the entire presentation, get the board's direction, move forward, and I'm assuming the board wants us to continue moving forward and checking in, obviously, with our group and others in the public that want to be a part of this process. So.
Great, thanks, Patty.
You said June 11th?
June 11th?
You're not on our schedule for
Not
that
yet.
session.
Charlotte got us those times this morning,
Okay,
so
'cause
you
right
won't.
now we have a full meeting that day.
Somehow,
We-
we're in there.
Right now, we did speak with Charlotte this morning, and she's gonna, we're gonna have an hour and a quarter on that agenda. She squeezed us in. She moved a few things around. She's a master, as you know.
All right.
And then on June 2nd,
Gonna
we
be
have
here?
9.
Let's- you
Let's
leave on
sort
the
that out with
12th?
Charlotte.
I'm
I
sorry.
just don't want to sell Brian short. If Brian needs an hour and 45, I don't want to give him an hour
Well,
and
plus,
15.
the other thing is we have people already booked on that agenda, and we want to make sure we honor that too. So we have a site visit that morning.
Right.
Right, we'll sort that out.
So, yeah,
Just so you
we
know.
will work that out. We do, on July 2nd, then, we do have 90 minutes.
We may have
Scheduled.
four of us on that meeting, right, Kelly?
Somebody might be watching.
I want to thank you all for coming. This is
yet.
this is great, and I appreciate everybody for hanging in there. And want you to know, I think we all have the same goal in mind. So this is great.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Just one more thought. That we spend a lot of time appointing citizen advisory boards. This group just came together, self-appointed group, working on this.
That's kind of how it evolved.
And you've been doing a lot of work. I've been aware of your meetings going on, and we didn't appoint you, but I'll tell you, your work is really appreciated, and we're listening to what you're saying.
So if
Can
you
I
want
buy
an
'em
official
lunch?
appointment, we're officially appointing you.
Yeah, you're official now.
I can't, it has to be
Thanks
done
a
by
lot.
resolution.
Okay, grassroots, we're going to take a
Thank
15-minute break.
You want 15 or 10, because we're already
We'll
behind.
go through 15. I think. Let's go 15.
Thursday.
I haven't heard anything.
15?
Out there.
Okay, we are ready to start, folks. It's Tuesday, May 21st, continuation of our work session agenda for today, and upcoming regular items. We've got Ride the Rockies special event discussion, and we have, is it Haleen Burklow here? Welcome.
I'm going to kick it off, but since this is Haleen's first trip in front of the board, so Suzanne Wolf for Community Development. Haleen Burklow is our new planning technician,
great.
who is charged with, at this point, mostly dealing with lots of special events, has sort of occupied her for several months with us. But so she's been the one, kind of the point person on this. And then Deirdre Moynihan is here representing Ride the Rockies.
Hi, Deirdre. Welcome.
So I'll kind of kick things off, and then if you have more detailed questions, they can both jump in. So I think you're all familiar with Ride the Rockies. It's a multi-day ride through, they change their route every year. They've come through Pitkin County on various occasions. I think the last was 2016. This time there will be 3 days actually where they're in Pitkin County and using roads and or trails in Pitkin County. So they have submitted an application for a permit from Community Development as well as from Open Space and Trails, and I guess I should say Janet Urquhart is here for Open Space as well for their portion of the permit. The days in Pitkin County are June 11th through 13th, and Haleen can kind of, as I talk, can kind of run through the different routes, but just generally on Tuesday the 11th, they're coming from Buena Vista and ending up in Snowmass Village. So basically their two host cities in the valley are Snowmass Village and then Carbondale, neither of which in our jurisdiction, but they're passing through many parts of Pitkin County. So they'll come in over Independence Pass, assuming the pass is open, which I think is their big concern right now. So they'll come down through the city of Aspen. They'll basically then go through the city of Aspen, cross over to the golf course trail, go along the golf course until we go underneath the highway and onto the Owl Creek Trail is essentially when they are then within Pitkin County. So their proposal is to use the Owl Creek Trail up all the way till they go up and over the divide. Then they would actually cut onto Owl Creek Road. At that point, they're in Snowmass Village, and they're ending up at the rec center in Snowmass. So that's Tuesday, June 11th. Wednesday, June 12th, the ride is from Snowmass Village to Carbondale. Initially, there were two routes proposed, And to cut to the chase, the second route, which was basically an optional ride to backtrack, go up Castle Creek Road, and then go back around and connect to Carbondale, has been taken off the table. Lots of concerns have been raised. You saw that from the caucus, as well as concerns about road construction, different construction projects going on up there. Everybody's acknowledged that there were just too many issues with that. So really, there's just the one route on the 12th of June, which would be the proposals to go down Brush Creek. And I'm going to jump to the, we've gotten input on some of the road versus trail issues, and we'll come to that, back to that. But we'll go down Brush Creek to get to Aspen, Mass, basically then connect to the Rio Grande Trail, go down, eventually all the way down the Rio to end up in Carbondale. There's some variations to that, but we'll get into those details.
Suzanne, could you just remind me, Aspen, Mass is the intercept lot down to
The intercept
Smith
lot
Road.
to drop down, Smith Hill. You end up at the bottom there. You're not at the trail. You actually have to climb up,
Back up.
a little bit to get to the Rio Grande Trail.
Right. Okay.
And then the third day, when they leave Carbondale, they're headed over to Hotchkiss. And so the proposal there would be to utilize the Crystal Trail until the Crystal Trail ends at the KOA or Bill Creek Road. And then they'll go on Highway 133 till they leave Pitkin County and then continue over McClure Pass.
We don't have a trail there.
Does the A stand for
That's
aid
one of the
station
issues.
on the map?
Yeah.
Okay.
So obviously, many agencies are involved in this on our level as well as more on the state level. Colorado State Patrol, they're working with, CDOT for the highway. We've run it through all the public safety agencies, obviously Open Space and Trails, the whole list of referral agencies you can see in front of you. Our big questions, I think we put to you in the memo, were one, the use of Castle Creek Road, which has since really then just come off the table. And the other was the question about use of our trails, our paved trails versus use of roads in some areas. And that was the big issue that came up in 2016, was use of the Rio Grande Trail versus alternative county roads or the highway. And in the end, through that discussion, it was determined that it would be appropriate and was approved to use the Rio Grande Trail. In this case, with multiple days, we have different places where, there's a question of road versus trail. I think to go to, let's see, the Wednesday ride coming down from Snowmass Village, whether that would be on the Brush Creek Trail or on Brush Creek Road. Again, variations on that, and I think it's easiest maybe just to say that it seems that the public safety agencies have all agreed it seems best if they can be on the trail, that's the trails that they would be on the trails. So that would involve the Owl Creek Trail the first day, Brush Creek Trail rather than Brush Creek Road, the use of the Rio Grande Trail as they continue down, and then the use of the Crystal Trail.
Can I just ask?
Question, Patty?
So if they use Brush Creek Trail, that leads them to the underpass. There wouldn't be
Correct.
an issue with crossing that intersection, which I
Correct.
think is better.
Yeah, it's definitely, then it's a direct, and it's not coming off of Brush Creek Road to then get them
Yeah.
into the underpass.
Brush Creek Road gets a little narrow and sketchy in some places, so.
So that seems to be, again, I think, just, again, quickly on those routes, that using the trails when those are available is preferable to, I think, all of the public safety agencies. A couple of other updates, since I think we said that the public safety group was meeting to discuss this last Thursday, and just a couple of the outstanding items. I mean, again, I think things are moving forward with those, is that Aspen Ambulance has basically wants to require some additional ambulance coverage while they are in the valley. So they are working through those issues in terms of licensing and what it looks like to provide that service. Deirdre can maybe speak to you about, they have traveling with them medical services, but again, Aspen Ambulance has determined that they would like to have additional coverage for that. And in addition, the sheriff's office has asked for them to pay for 2 deputies each day along with the open space rangers that would be available to be a to that. So
They can work the trails, if they're on the trails. they can-
exactly, trail and road, that they can provide extra coverage during the event. So again, I think those were kind of just the quick updates in terms of new information, but otherwise, essentially, we look at this as an approvable event under the regulations in the land use code. But we did feel, obviously, given the size of the event, the impacts on our resources, our trails, et cetera, we wanted to bring it to you to get any input you might have and any direction you'd like to give us on the permitting on our front, as well as for open space and trails.
Just real quick, on the ambulances, I'm sorry if you mentioned this, and they're not licensed in Pickens County, therefore only our ambulances could provide services. Is that correct?
How does that work?
Gabe brought that up, that they're not
I saw
licensed
that.
technically to operate within Pickens
Yeah,
County.
they have a state license, but they don't have a specific Pitkin County license, so they're working to get that. But customarily, so Stadium Medical travels with us, and they are ambulances, but they're like the triage.
Right.
Most counties, it's the counties that transport, and usually Stadium works that out with each county. Sometimes you have a county that has other events going on, and they'll be like, okay, Stadium, I want you to do that. So I do let them figure it out, but what we use them for is the triage. They're the first on the scene.
We need to clarify that, if triage is okay. I'm well aware of what triage is, or whether that's still incorporated into licensing. Just so you know, I believe licensing of ambulances has to come back to this board for approval, because we are the ambulance board. So just, if we need to do that, we need a heads up that we may have to do an emergency reso to get that done if need be.
Thank you.
George?
I argued in 2016 with at least one other commissioner why we're using the Rio Grande Trail versus Highway 82. Heading down Valley in the morning, you won't have hardly any traffic you're going to be dealing with coming on the down Valley lane on 82 from Brush Creek all the way down to Carbondale. On the other hand, you basically cut out the ability for anybody who's going up Valley using the Rio Grande Trail, because they're just going to be constantly running into hordes of people. So when you think about going over Independence Pass on Highway 82, going up 133 over to McClure's, the safest place for the riders to be actually is from Aspen down to Carbondale on Highway 82. It's because, again, you won't have much traffic heading down Valley in the morning. You've got a wide shoulder, and you're not impacting our trail. So I would suggest that we keep them on the highways.
I was just thinking that, when I go to travel down Valley now, sometimes in the mornings, I see rush hour when I hit Basalt, and I see rush hour in Emma and Willits and
Coming up Valley.
no, I think both directions. I see, but it's worse coming up Valley, but there's traffic and it's going 70 miles an hour. So I'm pretty concerned about the highway. I'm wondering if, it's a fairly short duration of time where we'd have that impact. It's at half a day. I'd question that it was safer to be on the highway because, we were out picking up trash on the highway last week, and the cars were going by us. They didn't slow down at all, even if we were standing on the edge of the road. It was, I could imagine it still being fairly scary on there. Of course, it's the same, as you said. They're already on 82 and they're on 133, and they're used to riding on highways. But that's an interesting question. I would say we've got these great bike trails. It would be a bit of a sacrifice for some of our residents who use them regularly, but it wouldn't be, I don't think it would be too much to ask for a day. Steve?
I was trying to think of an alternative to going on either the Rio Grande Trail or Highway 82, and the route that I came up with would actually be to go over the divide down Snowmass Creek, up East Cypress Creek, over Prince Creek Road, but a lot of it is gravel and dirt road, which I don't know if the Ride the Rockies can accommodate that. But it would be an awesome, parts of that would be awesome, being up, like going up to the divide by Prince Creek, by Mount Sopris. The views and stuff from up there would be really amazing. And I don't know if that would be an alternative for perhaps some of the riders to go that way on the county roads and not go on the Rio Grande Trail at all. Those who had bikes that could go on a non-paved surface.
I mean, I don't think, we haven't looked at that because it hasn't been proposed. I mean, I don't know that we'd want to end up with two, again, the two options, even with Castle Creek, ends up spreading resources out quite a bit.
Yeah.
So again, I'm not sure you want to look at two totally different options to provide support for them as well as, on our end, safety support on our end. So, just thoughts, I guess.
But that option
in
hasn't been
response.
vetted by public safety
No,
or anybody
no,
yet,
and
so
that
we
hasn't been
can't
vetted,
approve it
right.
or not approve it now.
Kelly?
I wasn't here for 2016, so I just have a couple of questions. I'd like to understand, what the organization of the ride is. Is it signed or flagged? Are there support staff continuously along the route from start to finish for all segment throughout the entire time? Is one question. I have a question for Janet about, what does 2,000 riders look like compared to, maybe a peak use or average use of the trail in the summertime, just to sort of understand, for me, what the impact is on the trails versus the road, and if people know where they're going, if they're getting lost, if they're diverting from the road and taking the trail anyway, some of that.
I think Deirdre, maybe, you can jump in on
Ours is on?
as long as
Red
it's
light.
red.
Red light.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry. Usually my voice tends to be loud enough. So on our route, we travel with, we sign it with signs like on H signs that go into, or we have larger stakes, and they're kind of just signs like this that'll have Ride the Rockies. So they're kind of minimal signs that they look for. And sometimes on trails, we're not able to do as much signage. There's just not the right space for it. Out on the roads, we also sometimes mark with orange chalk, only if there's like big debris. Like if there's a big hole coming up or something, we might, going up McClure Pass, there's some really big rocks. We would definitely flag that with orange chalk. We don't do that on trails. So on trail systems, what we use is human arrows. We use course marshals. So we use an extensive amount of course marshals. We use both community members, but we also travel with up to 10 to 15 course marshals that move from, here's the start of the day, they'll do this, and then they move to later on. There's a van of course marshals going around to direct them. On trails in particular, that's the best directional. We travel with 7 support and gear wagons, SAG wagons. We have 6 CSP on motorcycles. 1 is in a car, the commander. We travel with the 2 ambulances, 30 ride medics, 20 ride officials. So the ride medics, they just kind of leave whenever they leave that day when they ride the route with medical supplies and radios. So that they tend to be the first on the site just by the nature of being on the bike. Ride officials are there to ensure that the cyclists are following rules of the road, and it's more peer-to-peer when they're not. It is rules of the road where they have to stop. They have to follow all state laws for a bicycle at all times. Then I am on the route, and then we have a few other medical personnel on the route to provide that support. They also have a paper route map that they travel with, and there is Ride with GPS, so that they have these maps downloaded on their phones as well, so that they always have access to the aid stations, where they are and where they're going. And it can be used, what's really great about this is it can be used without data once they download it, so that it's kind of the most helpful. So if I've ever have to reroute, say a rock falls, I can just say, okay, you gotta divert here, and it's live for them so that everybody knows. So kind of in a nutshell, that's how the flow. There's also there's a specific route opening and a specific route closing. So they'll start, on this day, it'll be more like they'll start 7 to 9, and they have a 2-hour window to start. Then I base that fast and slow time. They'll have to finish, but I think on this day, it's one of the days, it's 4 p.m. and they have to be off. And we have no support before that, and we have no support after that. And so what that does, it keeps them kind of focused. They're not stopping, to hang out at the Woody Creek Tavern, or they just
Have a few beers.
and then on the road, they kind of stay
Well,
focused.
7 to 4, you could stop at the Woody Creek Tavern and still make it to Carbondale.
So it's to kind of keep them focused, but also to ensure that my route support is at the top of their game as well. I can't have people endlessly behind a wheel of a car supporting. So I try to keep it, and I run a pretty tight ship that way. And when someone is not at the finish and we're closing the route, we actually go find them, we talk to them. And if there's someone that's been working really hard and that they've been training, I don't say, okay, that's it, you're done. But I might leave someone with them because, people are coming from all over the world really to do this. So
By then, you're down to a few people.
well, you were down to a few
Not hun- it's
people.
not
We
hundreds
keep an
of
eye
people.
because it's really right around middle of the day where you're going to see the people where you have to say, come on, up to, let's get going. So that everyone's safe. I mean, that's my job, is to bring everyone home safely. So
Question? I have
I
one.
have a question.
Oh,
Yeah.
well, keep
Why
going
is
then.
this coming to us so late? I mean, we just, are dealing with these lots
that's a
of
really good
late permit
question.
requests.
Part of it is we started looking at the route and started making some changes, but then we got snow, and I had real trouble seeing the route. So there was just, every time we came, there was a lot of snow. Part of that, we also were looking at some things with the Forest Service, but then they were on furlough. So there was a series of things that then made it, I wasn't coming to, with concrete stuff. For example, I have looked extensively at that route. That would have been my first option. We just couldn't see whether the road was valid. You just couldn't see this winter, almost any locations. Is that a safe route? So that's kind of why. So that's on me. I didn't anticipate. I should have been here in October. I didn't anticipate what a winter. In many ways, I'm glad we have it, but I didn't anticipate that because usually I'm out here where I can see everything all winter long, and I just have not been able to do that. So I did not feel that I was coming. And I did have cyclists go out on that route in particular, and as much as possible would send people up to say, okay, is this viable, is this safer? Because this area is my greatest concern.
More, Kelly, or is that?
I just want to tag on to that because I sit on the Aspen Chamber Resort Association board, and Snowmass has had this printed on their events for the summer for quite a while. And I kept saying to staff, have we seen a permit? Have we seen a permit? And just so you know, this is not the first time this has happened to us coming in late. We have moving towards an effort to stick to our guns when we say permits have to come in time for us to carefully review them and put them through a safe process. So I'm just hoping in the future, and I'm saying this not just with your permit in general, but for all events that come through here, we have got to stick to our guns on a time frame so the community is prepared, so that public safety is prepared, so the participants in the event prepared, and so that we as a county aren't feeling at the last minute, if we say, no, you can't come through our county, we're the bad guys, and we're the bad guys enough sitting up here, so it would be nice if we could be working on this. Like with X Games, they come in so far ahead of time now because we have said we're not going to get pushed to that last minute again, and X Games has taken that seriously. So we need anybody, just speaking in a general, event permitting process to know that we really need those permits to be submitted in a really reasonable time frame so that we have time to fully vet them.
Thanks, Patty. Steve?
I'm wondering what the riders do when they get, like, they arrive in Carbondale. Some of them, they're going to be there early in the afternoon, potentially. Do they get on their bikes and then ride off on their own little tours, like to the Hot Springs
No.
Pool in Glenwood, or ride up?
No, for the
Ride
most
somewhere
part, they do
locally?
not. And it's interesting, I did take a straw, kind of a quick poll of all the riders, saying, okay, what are you going to do on this day? They're viewing this day kind of as a rest day. Are you going to, and that's when I was really looking at Castle Creek, because that had a lot of problems attached to it. Castle Creek, are you going to do the whole route, the Castle Creek, or are you just going to take the day off? And about 50% are just going to do the route. And then there was probably another 30% that were going to do the Castle Creek, and then the rest were, they're going to go to Aspen. They're going to hang out. So, and they do that kind of on their own, but not their bikes. They come in and their bikes go into a bike corral, and then they leave their bikes and their luggage with us.
They would ride the bus to Aspen that evening.
And we have an extensive shuttle, interesting enough, that is going to all the hotels in the area. And so most of them use that. We run it all day, getting people, especially because it's a short day, and they're staying in Snowmass and Aspen and Carbondale and Basalt during that day. They're kind of all over the place. So so they'll be using those, and they'll be using the local as well. So I think most of the questions I get have been, how do I get to Aspen? And so most of them would not be, they will leave their bikes with us, is kind of what happens on that day.
Okay. How many shuttle buses do you bring?
We have a total of 5 shuttle buses that day. I mean, it's different. We're kind of structuring it a little different this year. We used to travel with just 4, but some days didn't need as many. So now for this one, where it's about 5, because we're kind of all over the place. And those are 552 passenger vans.
Oh, wow, okay. Great.
So I guess the biggest question is road.
So, back to your concern, which is, I think, is legitimate in terms of 82. However, I think that could be mitigated with the presence and visibility of the State Patrol and Sheriff's Department, because otherwise they're going to have to be at these key intersections. Just going down from Aspen, Mass, as you know, that is probably one of the most gnarly little sections of anything, and I can anticipate some problems there.
Dangerous intersection.
And then you get on to the Rio Grande Trail, and then again you've got 3 or 4 crossings that you're going to need people. And so by just staying on 82 on a wide shoulder, heading down valley with utilizing public safety there, I think we can address that safety problem or the speed problem.
Good point. Okay, so I think
that decision.
I wanted to ask one question, which was, if I was on this ride and I saw an alternate route like what Steve proposed, I'd be tempted to do that. And what's keeping people from doing it? They're public roads. They could wander off. You're not going to, you may give them a lecture. I could imagine that.
Oh, yeah.
But how often does that happen? How often do people stray? Because we may get some people on the bike path. They may say, I'm taking the bike path.
Oh, very rarely.
Really? Okay.
Because what we provide is that support. There's that aid station. I mean, and they know that every time they get a flat, there's someone there that's going to help them with their flat. They go to aid stations and they're well taken care of. And
So they're pretty well incentivized to stay with the plan.
with the plan. And part of it is because we're providing that support. If they
Right.
go off,
They're on their own.
they're on their own, and so they've paid for the support. Because anybody can come ride these roads.
Right.
What they're paying for is the support we provide. We're
Great.
making it so that they don't have to ride with anything on their bikes. They have their water bottle and maybe a Cliff Bar in the back.
That's
and
it. Okay.
they go. And so that's what they look for. And so we've never had high volumes of people. I mean, occasionally there might be. I know that Carbondale, in this area, there's people that have homes here, so they may be straying off, but not it's insignificant numbers.
Got it. Well, since we're a tourist town, this is a large group of people who clearly love being here, being in the mountains, and on top of that, they're on bicycles. Like, that's what we're about, right? We're trying to disincentivize cars. I love it when tourists come through by bicycle. I think that's the coolest thing. So I think it's great. I think we've got the bases covered. Everyone's expressed
We have to
what
make a
they're
decision on road or
talking about.
trail.
Can I just see if Janet can answer my question about
Sure,
the
please.
user numbers?
You have to come up to the mic.
You have to be on a mic.
Hey,
Greg,
Janet, you have to come up, sorry. If there's more, Janet, you have to come to the mic, sorry. So what she's saying is she doesn't know the answer to that question yet.
Right,
Yeah, it will be an
but
increased
not
number of
2,000 in
bikes.
a 4-hour period.
Right, yeah, it's never that high, right.
Can
But
I-
today's a work session, so what we can do is nod when we're asking for something, but what,
well, we can make a decision here. I
We
mean,
have to make direction.
we're not going to, it's not going to come back to a public meeting for an ordinance or resolution.
okay, so we
Well,
can decide.
I would vote for actually having them on the Rio Grande Trail. The riders know the rules of the road and the rules of a road on the trail. If a local person is going the other direction, they get their half of the trail, and the riders are all good bicycle riders and would know to stay on their right side. I think that would actually be a safer situation. There are the multiple county road crossings down by the Lower River Road. And then that leads to a question I have. Do you need local volunteers to help being course marshals in the localities you go through?
I take local volunteers for anything that they want to do. So the answer to that is absolutely yes. We do have volunteers that I would move around, but we always can use more. And on that section, I mean, there's a lot of different intersections there, especially I think there's like 4 specific crossings that we would have like 2 course marshal sections so that, people know that there's cyclists coming, and then, and we don't, obviously our course marshals direct cyclists, not cars. So we would welcome them, certainly.
So do you have, like, on your website or something, is there?
There is a
way that
volunteer section, and you just,
Somebody can click
push
on the
that and click on it.
volunteer and,
yep.
okay. And this is being broadcast to the public right now.
I
So that's
gathered
partly
that
for their benefit. We might get, some people
volunteers, yeah.
volunteering around here.
So I've got to vote for the Rio Grande Trail here.
I have a question though about that. Janet, unless you want to come up maybe, how does Open Space and Trails feel about using the Rio Grande for this section of the ride?
There she is.
Will this one work? Do they all work?
It should
the
be
red
on,
light's
the
on.
red light's on.
We have no objection to it. Our lead ranger's been over this latest proposal, and he tells me Gary said it was okay.
Good.
Okay.
They'll have lots of conditions about where they have to make sure there are marshals placed. We'll tell them the riders have to stay to the right. They'll have to post the trails a couple days before the event, so other trail yacht riders just get a heads up, hey, this is coming.
Coming up.
Yeah.
Okay, thank
So
you.
it's doable.
I understand the concerns of both, the congestion on the trail and the safety on the highway. And I agree with Greg, since I've, for this last week, have been making lots of trips up and down Valley for some reason. And there's a lot of traffic from Basalt on down, and it's fast traffic. Even though the road is a little wider down there, especially by Cerise Ranch, there people are flying. I would think I'm going to lean towards supporting keeping it on the trail.
Ellen?
Yeah, I'd like to see the route that they take from Snowmass to be on the Brush Creek Trail as well. So, I mean, we do have to sort of make some decisions here about Brush Creek Road or Trail. I would choose the trail. I don't know if we want to divert people on the highway at that point rather than down the Aspen Mass Trail to the Rio Grande to get back on up at Lower River Road. It's an item for consideration. And then, Rio Grande from Old Snowmass to Emma is pretty straightforward. My biggest concerns are 133, after the KOA, where it gets really narrow. And then Patty, you remember going door to door, hear lots of complaints about road cyclists through that area of 133. So just some
There's no other
reminders
option.
about being considerate riders through there as well.
You
That's
need
where you'll
direct
have your
marshal attention
police
through
escort.
that.
Right, there'll be police state police and
But
maybe sheriff in there.
Snowmass to Brush Creek, well, obviously Snowmass, it's their jurisdiction, but Brush Creek Road, I think, was taken totally off and just putting them on the trail, because that road is so narrow in
It's
there.
our most
There's
dangerous
no
road.
shoulder. That's why we built the
Brush
trail
Creek,
there.
I
And
think
then
the
the
trail is the
transition under
recommended.
to Astor Mass, that short section will need special attention for marshaling to let people know it's a steep, decline to get down to the Rio Grande. I just think attention to those specific areas, sketchy areas along the Rio Grande, which I think Open Space and Trails is very well aware of. And I'll make sure that you have marshals at those spots.
Steve?
Please.
I wanted to note that my choice partly has to do with the fact 2 weeks ago I cleaned up the stretch of highway below Old Snowmass. Between the Jersey barrier and the driving lane is about 7 or 8 feet, 5, 6, 7, 8 feet wide or something. I was very colorful with bright safety colors and stuff. And I was going against the traffic, and there's a lot of traffic in the morning going down the valley, and they're traveling fast, and it's not comfortable at all. And I personally wouldn't want to be on a bicycle going the other direction on Highway 82, where you don't, if there's a Jersey barrier there, you don't have an escape route. And it's not necessarily a comfortable feeling. And I'm a bicycle rider also. I've been there on narrow shoulders and stuff on a highway, and so that's what I'm basing my, just knowledge of how much traffic is actually on the highway going down in the morning when the riders would be going down there. So I'm in favor of putting them on the trail.
Okay, I think we've got at least 3, and I'm leaning toward the trails also. That's what they're for. We'll see how it goes. I'm confident it's going to go well.
Thank you.
And I think that's your direction.
Right.
You're comfortable?
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for coming in.
Thank you.
We're going to move you on out and get the next group in because we're a little bit behind schedule.
Is Nan coming?
Okay, I see Sam is here. We're going to talk next about the Child Care Assistance Program, Ccap, rule changes. Sam, and maybe Nan if she's here, or is it just Sam?
I think it's just me.
All right, well, welcome.
All right, looks like we're on there. Well, hello, everyone. Thanks for having me. Like Greg mentioned, I'm Sam Landercasper. I'm the Economic Assistance Manager here in Pickens County under Human Services. And we're here today to talk about some upcoming rules to the Child Care Assistance Program known as Ccap. So just for anyone who's not familiar with the Ccap program, it's a program that helps low-income.
Yeah, tell her we're on.
It's a program that helps low-income families pay for child care assistance. It's a state-administered program, and that's where these rules are coming from. But we also like to, when we talk about Ccap, also talk about Kids First, which is a program funded through the city of Aspen that basically takes over where the Ccap program ends and helps those families with paying for their child care up to a higher income limit. So for reference, the current income limit for the Ccap program in Pickens County is 185% of the federal poverty level, which equates to approximately $47,500 of gross income for a family of 4. Currently, Kids First will help from that 185% up to 500% of the federal poverty level, which does reach approximately $103,000 gross annual income for a household of 4. So you see we've got pretty good coverage at this time. We made some changes to the program in July. We came to you guys and asked to lower the income limit from 200% of the federal poverty level, as well as requiring child support applications for households that had an absent parent. We looked at doing that to tighten up the program a little bit, as the program is generally overspent above the allocation by a significant amount, although we have been able to purchase excess dollars from other counties to usually offset that over expenditure. So the changes that we're looking at having coming up are a result of House Bill 1335. And these are state mandated changes. Essentially what happened is the state did a cost of living adjustment, which results in a rate change, as well as they looked at provider rates in the area. They did a market rate survey to look at what the average rates are that child care providers are currently charging. The results of this is that beginning July 1st of 2019, Pitkin County's Ccap entry-level income limits are going to go from the 185% up to the 265% of the federal poverty level, which equates to approximately $70,000 of gross annual income for a household of 4. So that's a pretty significant change in the entry level, which will allow for more people to be eligible. However, with increased utilization of the program, we also see increased cost. While our allocation is going up about $80,000 this year, from around $165,000 to around $250,000, that based on our current expenditures would basically make us whole at what we're currently spending. So looking at what the increase might be, we might still see higher expenditures for the program. The other change that's coming along is the market rate survey has made some changes to the rates that we're allowed to pay. And the way this works is there's a maximum rate allowable for the Ccap program. Providers who wish to participate in the Ccap program have a fiscal agreement with the county outlining the rates that'll be paid. So we can pay up to the maximum allowable. Otherwise, if a provider has rates that are lower than the maximum rates, that would be what we paid. These new rates that came about as a part of the market rate survey are lower than the current rates charged by 3 of our providers, and there are 2 others where the rates are partially lower than what they would normally receive. So it puts those providers in kind of a conundrum about would they still want to accept Ccap eligible children because they're going to be receiving less money than they charge at their normal rates. The Ccap program doesn't allow for these providers to charge the families or for us to subsidize that difference. They can only charge either the maximum daily rate or the provider's maximum rate. So that's an issue we're looking at. Fortunately, the 3 providers whose rates are above that don't currently have any Ccap eligible children attending that. So there wouldn't be anybody currently being removed from care at this point. And a major part of that is that in order for providers to be eligible to receive Kids First assistance, they have to have an open fiscal agreement for Ccap. So that's very helpful to us as far as keeping a wide variety of high-quality providers available to Pitkin County families. So we just wanted to bring this to the board to let you guys know about these changes that are coming up, as well as discuss how we've been looking at this. We do have a little bit of information about possible impact. We spoke with Kids First, and they let us know that in that change of rate between 185 to the 265%, looking at their information, there could be up to 11 children that would be moving to child care, Ccap care, which currently accounts for around $123,000 annually of expenditure. So where we run into the uncertainty is that accounts for families that live in the Aspen area or work here. So we don't know what this looks like when we look out towards Basalt or families in Snowmass. So we do anticipate a change to our current expenditures. Speaking with Nan and with Shirley with Kids First, we kind of came to the idea that we might want to continue as we've been doing and see what that change is before we make any real decisions. If we were to see these expenditures go up to untenable levels, there's really 2 actions that we could look at, and I think we've discussed these before, but to go over it again, one would be an enrollment freeze, which would essentially stop any additional enrollment into the program, stop expenditures from getting any higher, and then as people, maybe kids transition into kindergarten or people became ineligible due to income, that might reduce expenditures without allowing additional enrollment. The other option would be a wait list which would then everybody's welcome to apply. They'd go through the eligibility process, but then we'd be capped at a certain level, and they would essentially sit waiting for a spot to open up. Those are the main options I think that we would have. But like I said, we're really looking at kind of just seeing how this shakes out once the actual rules go into effect, so that we have more data and a better way to judge what action we should take moving forward.
Kelly, question?
I have a couple of questions, please. If we're not allowed to make up the difference between the cap and the provider rate, is Kids First able to make up that difference?
The way the Ccap rules work is it says that they can only charge the amount in the fiscal agreement, and that's really to prevent providers from charging households that amount. But the rules, I've clarified it with the state, we wouldn't be able to subsidize that. No one else can subsidize it, because then technically the provider is charging the customer more for that care that they're eligible for through the Ccap program.
Okay. And then could you prioritize, like with a wait list or something, would the program allow you to prioritize families at those lower income levels?
Yes, there's not a lot of rules around the wait list. We would just have to create a policy that we found to be acceptable. So there would be, yes, ways where we could
Going
prioritize.
up, we might be able to say we want to keep that 185. to
Right, like
200.
our county plan says that any children with disabilities would get that automatically. So that's, we could adjust the county plan if we wanted to focus on prioritizing lower income families for that eligibility.
Thank you.
Steve?
Yeah, what's the effect on the capacity of the daycare providers? Is there gonna be, do they even have space right now? If we came up with more children that the parents wanted to put in, is there room in the daycare providers for that?
Well, that's been an issue is finding space even when folks are able to pay full price. What we see happening with this is that there are probably children who are currently receiving Kids First assistance who would transition to the Child Care Assistance Program without leaving their current care. As far as expanding, we are able to make fiscal agreements with any provider who's interested in the program, which might change with the income limits increasing, so we might be opening new fiscal agreements. I don't see it generating any new child care slots anywhere in the area, unless for some reason there was a provider who was just not filling spaces for some reason and could then take Ccap assistance.
I think Shirley would have, sorry, Nadine.
You have to come up and come to the light.
If
Come into the
Shirley
light.
were-
The
Shirley
routine.
were here, I feel obligated to say there are not enough childcare slots, especially for infant care. And we're super sensitive to that. And so we're not making any more slots or less slots. The needy families, have been there. They continue to be there. And as Sam said, Kids First has been serving them. Now we're going to serve them. Whether or not there's a bunch of people who haven't been served, we'll see. So we kind of have to wait and see.
Patty?
Help me.
Yeah.
Help me clarify. In the past, we've been able to buy, right, dollars?
Yeah.
And therefore, we didn't need a wait list. We weren't concerned. We would just keep enrolling and then figure it out. Now, can we still buy dollars? It's just that the dollars might be shorter, less dollars for us to buy. Is that a concern?
So the rules say that we can continue to buy dollars for the maintenance of effort. So
Right.
11 cents on the dollar, right?
Right.
We pay their MOE,
Right.
maintenance of effort. We cannot buy dollars from a county that has created a freeze or a wait list.
Because they need to address their own needs within.
Right. So what the state is trying to do here is to create parity across the state, even though there are cost of living differences. And before this, there were choices that counties had, like what percentage income threshold and what's the rate you're paying. They've taken those choices away so that
what I've heard is that their intention is that we have more wait lists and freezes so we can argue for more dollars. Will that happen? I don't know. Just in the last 2 weeks, I've probably gotten 8 emails from counties that have 50 to 100,000 that they want to sell this year. And I don't see those counties, their allocations are not going down, strangely. And so they're still
Getting the same amount of money they're not using.
So they don't have childcare providers in their communities, Lake County, and some of the eastern plains. They don't have the services for kids to go into care. And also, there's enough poverty so that the cost is just too high for families. So there's a lot of reasons.
Right.
We're hoping that we're going to still be able to buy. That's part of what we will review when we come back to you in the fourth quarter report and kind of look at where is all this going? What's our opportunity to buy? Are we going to be able to bail ourselves out, or do we need to consider a different action?
Okay. I think it's wise to continue doing business with an eye on what might be changing out there that we need to really be focused on a quick action if need be.
Thanks, George. Okay. Yeah, Nan, I wanted to hear what you just said for Patty, that, regarding buying dollars, and the question was, will it be easier or harder? It sounds as if it's become easier, or it's just the same as previous years.
I think it's the same.
It is, okay.
Yeah. I mean, we have to compete with Boulder. Boulder has to buy over $2 million worth of Ccap to become whole. So we secured our $75,000 in January from Kit Carson County, who was sure they weren't going to spend. But even in that transfer, the state made contact with Kit Carson and said, "Do you understand? If you sell these dollars now, you blah 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 blah.
Not getting them back.
You can't sell it and then create a wait list. You can't." And the state was more cautious. Kit Carson's like, "We're ready. We have too much money." So, so we'll see. Thank you to Kit Carson County.
Thank you.
And is there just maybe a possible benefit that, we shift the money to us and Kids First frees up for something else?
Potentially, sure.
For 11 families?
Yeah.
Or 11
What do you
children?
think? Did you talk to Shirley about that?
Well, it's a lot. It's pretty theoretical right now, but I think Shirley and their board would then look at if they did have this. I know they've been overspent just like we have been, so maybe it just helps them get closer to net zero. But if there were to be a surplus, I'm sure they'd discuss what they could do with that.
And that's part of why we just need to watch this, because we don't know.
Any idea if city council knows what's going on?
No, good question. We
They're
should ask
involved in
Shirley
this
if she's.
thought process as we
Yeah.
are, because I think it's important that they know what's happening out there.
Good
And I'm sure as of June, we'll have city council more involved in this.
We'll ask Rachel. And just another final reassurance is we have a very healthy fund balance in human services. So if we are not able to buy enough dollars next year, we have some cushion. Mm-hmm.
All right.
Great. Well, thank you for the update.
Yeah, thank you, Sam.
We're going to
Thank you.
keep watching it.
Nan, before you leave real quick, what's happening with our meeting tomorrow? We have a workforce meeting and then.
We're meeting and we're going to send them a phone number to call in.
Okay. Upstairs, 9:30, correct?
Thank you.
I might not be able to get here. The road might be closed.
I think
That
it's
was a joke.
9:30.
We might be irritated with that joke.
Yeah, I know.
It's good.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
We've been planning this meeting forever, and somebody just called and said, "I'm not sure I can get it," because the roads were like, "You're calling in."
Rachel, you are, you're early, but should we shoehorn?
Lauren told me to be early because you might be early.
Right.
Bring her
Well,
up.
we have future agenda review, board open discussion, and then you.
Bring her up. She's
We can
here.
bring you up now and get you in and out.
Okay, great.
Great.
Okay.
It's nice to see you.
Maybe she wants to listen to our discussion.
Rich, do you know?
Oh, it's broadcast live. There's already opportunities.
Rich, do you know how to roll up the blinds?
I can do that.
That'd be great.
It
I
looks
like to
dark.
see what
Looks
the
like it's
weather's doing.
nighttime
Yeah.
already,
Well, it was hailing a few moments ago.
No, I was watching
that
them
seems to
stuff.
have
So
passed.
for our viewing audience out in the Roaring Fork Valley and beyond, we're going to the Club 20 update, board membership update, and Rachel has been our member for so long. She's back to give us another report.
Yeah, thank you so much. And as I certainly want to compliment Steve Child for being at a lot of the Club 20 meetings and being there as well during these major things. Having spoken with John and others, it seemed you wanted an update that focused more on the CORE Act going forward and Club 20 being there. For the record, Rachel Richards. Let me just mention, I have put on my work session agenda request list with the city that we talk about childcare issues, and I would imagine that perhaps if they get to a point where they're having surpluses, it could be looked at for future construction of future needs of affordable childcare. So there's always some good way to spend it. But thanks for dealing with that issue before then. As you know, Senator Bennett introduced the CORE Act, which creates great protection for the Thompson Divide area, something Pitkin County has been struggling and working towards for probably a dozen years. And there was, I'd say, dispute and perhaps unconscious or conscious dropping of the ball, in my opinion, by Club 20 during their policy meeting in the spring that was at Ute City Ute Water Conservancy in Grand Junction, and then the actual spring conference. And Senator Bennett had John Whitney, who attends those meetings and gives them a great deal of attention at both of those meetings. And the meeting, the first marine policy meeting, really focused more on developing a multiple use policy. Club 20 felt they didn't really have a policy resolution on multiple use. And that went back and forth. There were some corrections and amendments that were made. Gunnison County was participating vigorously, as well as San Miguel, which was really nice to have some other voices at the table. Although I suggested the idea, it got kind of sidelined and then later added to that resolution by Chris Trees. I'd like to thank him for bringing it up from the audience, to include language that Club 20 acknowledges that not all parcels are suitable for all multiple uses, and not all multiple uses can occur on the same parcel successfully. So that started kind of the conversation, and I think people who are proponents of the CORE Act began feeling that the multiple use policy was being developed in order to address the CORE Act and some of those things. At the larger conference where the general board of director adopts or doesn't adopt policy resolutions and renewals and updates of those policies, the chair of the Public Land Steering Committee stated, well, we're not going to have a position on the CORE Act. We're not talking about the CORE Act today, on and on. And then as that meeting was ending, John Whitney did tell me, you know, he had heard that Club 20 was talking about sending a letter of concerns. And I spoke as well with Chris Holstrom, San Miguel County Commissioner, and you know, she had the same thing, and they are very, very supportive of the CORE Act. And so we did approach Christian Reese and say, hey, you know, a letter of concerns after telling everyone you're not commenting on this or taking a position, not taking a position, is a little awkward. And I would encourage you not to do that, and that we should, you know, downward help that letter, if it goes out, has the positive aspects of the CORE Act as well. And I believe you've been handed the Club 20 letter.
Stuff.
Okay, so going from there, I left and went on vacation, which had been planned for a while. So I was out of the country in Costa Rica when they had the first executive committee phone call about how to deal with the CORE Act. And during that phone call, the executive committee decided, yes, we do want to write a letter of concerns. When I got back the very first morning, there was the first draft letter of concerns. And I have to say, serving on the executive committee has been a privilege and something I enjoy, and believe I can offer some good guidance to Club 20 on a number of issues. However, being on the executive committee, I really couldn't share drafts of the letter. It would have broken protocol. But I did complain quite vigorously that I thought the letter was way out of line, and that it included a lot of language on the Thompson Divide area, as a specific example, or things like that. So they called a second conference call, and I weighed in on my concerns that were really far-ranging, between Club 20 really trying to move closer to the new West and to accommodate all people's needs, as well as to recognize what longstanding members had been pursuing through the CORE Act for a long, long time, and that they were really insulting a great number of their members between San Miguel County, Gunnison, ourselves. They did have the letters in hand that people had sent in support of the CORE Act, as well as having heard more directly from those counties. So that letter went through at least 2 or 3 iterations to get to this version here, and you'll notice it has deleted any specific reference to the Thompson Divide, which had been used as an example that there was not consensus of surrounding communities. And I had to say, no, I think there's a lot of consensus of surrounding communities. And Garfield County has not weighed in support. I'm not sure if that's a clear opposition, but the drafters of the CORE Act have been trying to work with them and bring them further along. I don't know if it's their only objection, but one of their objections was that Pitkin County hadn't dealt with the methane escaping from the Coal Creek mines, and that we should do some sort of methane capture there, and would permanent protection prevent that? I really don't know, back and forth on that issue where it should go. But at any rate, they got to a third and final letter, which you see here. And again, from the very beginning, I urged a process that I thought Club 20 should reach out directly to affected counties and counties with land within the CORE Act, that they didn't have to show them the draft, but they could ask them about the various issues between water management, fire management, and those sort of things, healthy forests. But they chose not to. And I asked them repeatedly that they should really sit down with Senator Bennett's office first and see if any of these concerns were already answered. And again, they chose not to do that. It has been said by John Whitney and others of Bennett's staff that the CORE Act does address these concerns very, very well, particularly fire management. In reading the Summit Daily News, Dan Gibbs, our director of Colorado's Natural Resource Department, and also a fire specialist and a fireman, I'm not sure the formal name, but forest fire active, has said that no, he does not see any reason why the CORE Act would prevent healthy forest management or firefighting efforts when necessary and as necessary. So this is kind of where we are now. They had gone ahead and sent the letter to Senator Bennett's office. Some, again, believe that these are repeated industry concerns that don't really have much substance to them. And that the letter, in my mind, really does not take into account the many compromises that went into effect of creating the CORE Act, that there were other properties and lands that perhaps were broader boundaries of lands that some environmentalist groups and communities would have rather seen. There was a lot of work done with the off-highway recreation users, and no, they don't get to go everywhere, but they were certainly accommodated with existing trails. And so there was a lot of what I would say fairly empty concerns that, well, there's just problems with it. There's just problems with it. And it's just 4 bills thrown together. It's just 4 old bills thrown together. It's like, no, there was a lot of work put into this, a lot of compromise. And I'm sure Steve would remember the years at CCI of the San Juan Wilderness Bill trying to get support from that group. And so there's been a lot of work trying to preserve these lands.
Rachel, can I ask you a quick question on process? So the executive committee is drafting a letter, but you couldn't share the drafts with the rest of the members of Club 20?
No.
Well, that right there is a question to me. If they're representing the members of Club 20, Why couldn't they see the draft letter?
Well, the executive board is composed of folks who are elected as regional representatives. And so a fellow named Tom Harned is Eagle County and several others, I think including Pipkin. I'm only on the executive board as secretary, not as a representative of those communities. I did personally reach out to John Ely to ask if he knew what were the concerns about, quote, existing valid leases in the Thompson Divide area, other than the ones I'm aware of, like the Wolf Creek storage. It's just that it's a work product, Patty, and it's not finished. And they do talk to the chairs of the various subcommittees, put the input in, but being a draft and not a complete product. And you'll see throughout it's kind of referring to existing resolutions that have been passed by Club 20.
That's what they base their decision-making process on.
Yeah, so
I just think it's interesting, especially with something that is known to be controversial in this part of Colorado. That group is controversial in this part of Colorado.
That's true, too.
I agree with your point that, yeah, fine, you're going to put in your points of concerns. What about putting in the other sector, the other side of the issues, their points of support? And I think that Michael Bennett's office sees that and understands it. It's just where that letter goes from there that might not be helpful.
Well, you're really right on the money, Patty. I emphasize that I thought this was a real opportunity for bridge building and for relationship building from Club 20, as it is a controversial and a divisive issue. Again, others feel that perhaps this was just some positioning to be able to give other federal representatives a platform on which to say no, or why they couldn't support it, that there's still concerns out there. And, I don't know that you would ever get to a point of everyone being 100% happy, one way or the other. You'll notice that it does reflect frequently in the letter the term that counties are both directly and indirectly affected by the bill. We certainly have seen that before on other issues where a Mesa County will say, but we are the suppliers for the fracking and natural gas extractive industry all the way up to Rio Blanco and all the way down to Garfield, and you're banning it in your area affects our businesses. Indirectly. And certainly the same is true of the timber industry and so on. But again,
question from George.
Yeah, go ahead, please.
Just a comment. It's not a big surprise.
Yeah.
But frankly, when we talk about the need for bridge building and relationship building, we need to really begin with Garfield County because their change of heart, at least from one commissioner, after we've had their support for several years, was very disheartening. And of course, that's what Representative Tipton just latched right on to, saying, oh, well, Garfield County is not even supporting this. So, it's an uphill battle. I think Senator Bennett's office is aware of that. They were just hoping to get this in for markup, and hopefully with the next administration, we'll see this going forward. But between Club 20, Garfield County, Tipton, and Gardner, you can only hit your head against the wall so many times. So I appreciate your work on this, Rachel.
I've got the bruises. But yeah, and I won't take too much more of your time. I think that for all of them, it really hinges on the term permanent withdrawal. And we were able to bring Garfield along as it was a 20-year, and we'll all see where we are in 20 years. I think we'll be burning up more than ever in 20 years from everything I read. But I think that in general, the Bennett's office feels that it was disingenuous to say we're not commenting on it or we're not taking a position, but yet we're going to throw these negative comments on the table, and that it was not a reciprocal relationship because he has worked and their office has worked very hard with Club 20 in the past. And, I have to say there's common ground often with Club 20 on a number of things. They were a very strong ally in broadband rules and moving forward with things on broadband. They were supportive of transportation funding last year, but not too many of the Club 20 counties actually ended up voting that way other than ours and a few others. So there are common interests. They are planning their July policy meeting in this area for the first time ever that I can recall to try to, it's going to be more the healthcare and education and business affairs, not public lands and energy. But that's, you know, so you've also seen the letter now from the San Miguel County Commissioners. And Chris Holstrom was one of the attendees on their behalf at the meetings. You know, very, very frustrated with where this has gone. San Miguel has pulled out of Club 20 before. They seem to be back in now. I know Kathy Chandler Henry has been going as an individual. She was very hopeful that she would get her county to join going forward, but she said this may just not put the full kibosh on it. And I think that George is really right that this is, it may have been destined to be already, but this really makes it more of a statewide issue. You know, if you start having a Moffett and Rio Blanco say that through this forum, or AG&C, Associated Governments of Northern Colorado, that we're against the CORE Act, well, then it's just as likely to see a Boulder and Denver and Front Range communities say, well, we're all for the CORE Act because of the outdoor recreational economy and what it offers us. And, you know, so the battle's far from over. It's really just the beginning. I do think it's always been valuable to be close to knowing what everyone else is thinking and to work across the aisle that way. I'm not sure if Kara and you are going to continue with a letter. I think that would probably be appropriate. She's kind of held off to talk to me and to wait until we all talked, I think. But, you know, it just is a lack of engagement with affected counties. It's disrespectful to the senator's office, the process they're going through. And very frustratingly, it's always this two sides of the local control issue. We really believe in local control until we don't. We believe in local control with the feds until we don't like something, and then we let the feds to outlaw it. So we go back and forth on when, but Club 20 is a membership organization of self-selected people, businesses, counties, and so on. You know, I think that they need to modernize or really become something that is just sidestepped and looked aside on. So I'm not sure what type of letter. I would suggest going forward to the policy committee meeting in July that will be held in Pagosa Springs, and bring a resolution, maybe two resolutions, one of support and see where that goes with the group, but maybe one declaring true neutrality, that you know, Club 20 has decided this issue divides our community. There are different interests at different states,
so we're stepping
back, but we are formally neutral on it. And just see where those two things go. I don't know if it's time to end the relationship or not, but I would guess or anticipate that someone might present a resolution opposing the CORE Act at the July policy meeting, and I think it would be important to be there to be prepared to speak against that.
You just, you know, you keep your friends close and your enemies closer.
Yeah, is that the Godfather?
That's the Prince.
I thought that was
That's
Rachel.
the Prince.
I thought it was Rachel who quoted that.
Machiavelli.
I thought it was quoted in the Godfather, but
Well, I was enthusiastic about joining on with the letter that San Miguel County, you know, doing something in the same vein. I think that Club 20 should certainly know that they've frustrated several other counties.
Yes.
Somebody was thinking of calling it, you know, Club 17 or Club 12 from this point on.
Club 5.
Club 5.
Club Tipton.
Yeah.
It's more like it.
So I would propose that we draft something.
Well, I think Kara's working on it, so let's just have her fine tune it and bring it back to us on Tuesday.
So,
Steve?
Yeah, I think we should write a letter to the Club 20 Board of Directors and then just expressing our concerns about the process that was followed and stating our position. But then I think we should send another letter about the CORE Act to all of our,
Yeah, that's what I was
our
talking about.
delegation, and pointing out the differences where, you know, saying we are Club 20 members and we weren't consulted in this letter, and here is our position, and really put a positive spin on reasons to support the CORE Act.
I would support doing that.
I would agree, and just to add briefly, and speaking with John Whitney after the fact, I have suggested to him, I think you just take these 6, bullet points that they've offered as concerns and, create a rebuttal and how they're answered in the act and give it to us, your foot soldiers, to have, but you don't want to see 6 small counties in Ouray or San Miguel and Pitkin all separately trying to answer those questions within the bill. He said, well, all the time spent on that is time not getting the bill passed. And I said, well, I think answering those are how you get the bill passed. And Club 20 is in Washington, D.C. this week. They go every 2 years. I did not think it was appropriate to ask for Pitkin County to support that trip for me,
Well,
so I didn't.
if they're all out of town, let's make some changes while we're there. As far as writing a letter to Club 20, I think we need to be careful. I think we should see if Kara can draft something off of the letter from San Miguel and bring it back to us. We need Rachel's input on it too before we send it.
That makes sense.
She'll know how many people we're going to upset, maybe.
All the right ones.
I just want to follow up on Rachel's suggestion and thank you. Sitting on CCI for the last 4 months, I'm just, you measure
Rachel did it
success in sort of micro movements among these groups sometimes. So you've really been in that for a long time, and I appreciate your endurance.
Thank you.
I just am wondering, for the July policy meeting, you've advocated that someone be there to, voice support or at least neutrality. Are you doing that on behalf of our board?
I certainly am planning.
Okay.
I found out the city has dropped its Club 20 membership. I found that out in April. I didn't realize this, and it was primarily over climate change issues and oil and gas industry support, without question, of climate change. So I don't think the city will really be picking that up anytime soon, or at least in a timely enough manner. I would plan on going and attending. I'd hope Steve or any others could go too, because it might be good to start more succession planning through that group as well. But I do not have a second job right now that might end up interfering with that, and I'd have to leave that a little bit open. But it's on my calendar, and I'm planning on it.
Let us know the details, and we can
absolutely.
Dates are July.
I didn't bring my
send it. Just send it.
To make sure
here,
we weren't creating a gap.
Yeah, we do not want a gap. And Steve has generally been attending as well, so there's always a voice at the table.
I looked in my calendar, and I don't have any of the dates written in yet. So.
Yeah.
We'll pick it up and follow up with that.
Okay.
But thanks for that report.
Well, and to the extent possible, when they have their policy meetings here, any of us can go as Pitkin County's a member. And they're going to be up at the Stonebridge in Snowmass. And that is a chance to perhaps meet a few of the people there and say hi. And
keep us in that loop too, so we can.
I'll do that.
Thank you, Rachel.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks,
Oh,
Rachel.
please.
Before, just a little bit of direction then from Kara's standpoint. From what I'm hearing, it's a letter to Club 20. San Miguel's is more along the lines of, tell us why we should still be a member.
Right.
I don't think I'm hearing that, but it's dissatisfaction with the process.
But the process and our concerns is
That is
the letter.
appealing.
The letter didn't show both sides of this story.
Correct. Okay, I just wanted to make sure
But
that's
there's some
kinda-
points in here I think that Kara can.
Absolutely. Yeah, I just wanted to make sure.
And the other is a letter in general support of CORE, which I think she's already working on.
Right.
I certainly wouldn't mind expressing our frustration
Yeah.
at hearing that this happened.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, great.
Okay. Thank you very much for your time.
Thanks.
Thanks,
Thanks,
Rachel.
Rachel.
Thank you,
Great
Rachel.
to see you. Okay, now, do you want to move on to board reports, or should we go back to, let's see, future agenda review? I'm putting it out for suggestions.
Let's go back to an order.
Okay, so here we are back at open discussion, or regular meeting items, future agenda review. We're going to fly through this. Anything from staff?
I do. I've got two. Ann Driggers, our finance director, brought to our attention that the Colorado Department of Revenue has kind of changed their method of collecting sales tax on goods that are purchased outside the county and then brought in, which affects use tax collection. So she's going to want to come before you all, and I think we're looking at maybe June 4th at a work session to kind of talk about that, because
June what, 4th?
June 4th, and whether we're going to need a resolution. I think that it's going to go back and look at a previous a resolution. So she's working with Ely's office right now, the attorney's office, on whether it's 1 or 2 reads with Jeanette. But you'll get more detail on that. So that's something that's coming up in the future.
Okay.
And then also, we have the results of our it's called the Employee Engagement Survey, Opinion Survey. And we do have the opportunity for the council that put that on for us as a third party to come and make that presentation. We did this last, I guess it was in 2016. Its Employers Council will come in and make that report. We have got the opportunity to do that on June 4th, but I think that I think Kelly and Steve are going to be gone on that meeting. Do you want us to push that out? We can give you the results. It's just kind of reporting out. It's entirely up to you. We could look for a different date if you really want to hear that from them or not.
And you've confirmed them to travel here?
We have, but we can also pick an alternate date.
Yeah.
So how comprehensive is the packet that comes with it?
Theirs is general. I mean, it kind of
The
goes over
survey.
everything, and
Right.
yeah, it's just
Survey results.
yeah.
Would that be enough? Do you feel like you really need to
I can watch it on grassroots.
watch it or read it, the
Okay.
packet, and go from there? I'd say let's stick to the plan is what I would recommend. But Steve,
Okay.
what's your? You feel like you need to be here for that?
I'll just, I can review watch the video
I'm
and
more
read the
concerned
packet.
about missing the open space and trails joint meetings.
And I guess maybe if we get any questions ahead of time, then
Sure.
we could.
Yeah, we can get that out early for you.
Yeah.
You could certainly ask them, so. But overall, it looks actually really good. It's very supportive. A couple areas, things certainly talked to, but, okay.
Great. Anything else from you on that?
That was all I had.
Previous agenda?
Patty?
Yeah. Just to make sure, on 5/28, I will get here as soon as I can. I know we have, because I have an ACRA meeting. Oh, I should be able to be here.
Okay.
On that, we were gonna add executive session, personnel discussion.
For next
right, we
Tuesday,
discussed
if
that
we
for
needed
next
to.
Tuesday.
I don't know what, they should be able to do it maybe at the end of the day we have. But yeah, because I have an ACRA meeting
3:30
till,
or,
Oh,
well,
you're there till 11.
4:30 or 10
Yeah.
o'clock.
I'd go for 10 o'clock.
Me too.
I won't be here.
Sorry.
It's a personnel issue. I would like to be here. I'm going to ask for that.
What's happening with ACRA?
ACRA, it's ACRA meeting day. 10:30, I can leave ACRA early. How's that, George? I'll compromise.
Fine.
Let's go for 10:30. We'll try that.
All right, so that's that day. And then on the 11th, we're doing the ambulance site visit.
That might get truncated to a slideshow, is what I'm told, or what I.
No,
It's-
we're not going to do a
it's-
facility tour?
Well, we can.
May be busy that day. I'm just want to make sure we talked about this earlier.
We didn't talk about it, did
I
we?
talked about it with Rich, and so
Oh.
we're talking about it now.
What are we busy with that day that we can't do the ambulance site visit?
We're adding
On the 11th?
energy code discussion
Yeah,
That's
Oh.
Brian
to
Paul.
that.
yeah.
But
And
we also
honestly, I
end our
think
day at 4.
Brian Paul's thing is going to be more necessary. We could probably.
Then I'll just set up a site visit with somebody else because I want to see the building.
Well, yeah, we can,
Yeah, he may go out any time. I mean, it's not
Yeah,
a big
I'll
deal.
I'll just do that then. Okay.
yeah, just trying to offer up opportunity to,
I think we're going to put
Spend a
Brian
little more
Paul in
time on
there,
this.
and we'll but if we need a slideshow or update, fine. If not, we'll take the tour another.
I'll just go out there, don't worry about it.
Yeah.
And on the 12th, George isn't here, and remember, I have to recuse for the ski company, so I want to make sure the ski company knows. You guys can talk about it tomorrow, but there'll only be 3 commissioners here that day. On Wednesday, June 12th, it's already been kicked, the ski company's already been scheduled on that day for another extended meeting. They'll only have 3 members of the board here, Kelly, Steve, and Greg. I just want to make sure that they know that, and you guys can talk about it tomorrow. I just wanted to bring it up. And then on 6/20, George, will we be back for EOTC?
No.
So 6/20, George will not be here for our EOTC meeting, and that is not noted, but we need to make sure that we have the rest of us there, because I like it when we show good support at those meetings. And it's here too, I think, isn't it?
It's here.
You're hosting.
All right. Anybody else? Steve?
Yeah, it's on the sheet for the June 4th meeting. Then on the second page of it, there's the Ccap Strategic Planning Retreat. And the meeting actually is June 5th and June 6th, which I think should be reflected on there.
Yeah, it just has the reception down there, doesn't it?
Because on June 6th, it goes through 5 p.m. So starts at about noon on
p.m. June 5th.
Or 1 p.m. on June 5th through 5 p.m. on June 6th is the entirety of the retreat.
That's all I had.
Okay, that's it for future agendas. Open discussion.
I think so. Can I just look?
Sorry, Kelly. Still looking?
Yeah, because I thought we were trying to have more time for a joint, oh, we do, forget it.
That was easy.
Yep, I just wanted to make sure we were trying to schedule another joint meeting with Open Space and Trails. So we have one on the 4th and then the 25th.
Okay, so here, board open discussion.
I have a couple things.
Patty?
I've been contacted by Lee Mulcahy. He wants to apply for the Senior Housing Board again. He was told that he could not even apply. He said John Peacock made that decision, policy decision, that he could not even apply. And I know there are issues with Lee being on our volunteer boards, but I still think it's the public's right to apply and go through an interview process and have a decision made than just somebody on county staff saying you can't apply. I don't know how the board felt about it. It's really up to the board as a whole.
I thought we had that discussion, frankly, the last time he applied, that we decided that wasn't
appropriate.
It wasn't appropriate, and so.
Well, but he was told he could not even apply for anything.
Well, I think that was that discussion back then, but we can revisit it, of course.
I just want the board for that decision to know that it's coming from the board, not from the county manager.
Right, so it's
I'm
county
looking to see
manager pursuing county policy. We could revisit it because
we don't really have a county policy on it.
Well, it seems that the
Like
county
in the
manager
writing.
was following our direction.
That's a better way to put it. So if we all, but we have a new member of the board, so if we all are still in that position, then I can go with it. I just couldn't make that decision on my own with Lee calling me.
Yeah, I think part of, as I remember, part of the decision had to do with the fact that he was involved in different actions between he and the ski company at that time, and maybe also the APSA
I don't know what that had
housing
to.
thing had already started, perhaps, I can't remember, but we didn't want to put him on a board while he was involved in all of these almost legal actions that were put him in.
And he still is, so we
And he
can
still
keep
is
that
at this
policy the same.
point, so I think, I mean, I would rather wait until, when he is no longer in any legal action with the city or APSA or the county or, the
restraining orders.
Restraining orders and all that kind of stuff, then that would be an appropriate time that it'd be
that's fine
okay
with me.
to consider him for any of the boards.
Okay. I just needed
Thank you for that.
Yeah.
clarification. The second one was I got a call from somebody from Phillips Trailer Court, Mobile Home Park, whatever we're calling it, Phillips Curve, who wanted to find out about purchasing the mobile home unit. And he already has a unit there, tiny home on a lot that he rents from the county. He owns the home. He has the opportunity apparently to buy the unit next door and lease that lot, but he wants to keep his other unit with the tiny home so his mother-in-law can live there. He now has a small child, infant. And he was told that we're not considering any new homes or moved homes or anything, and I would like that discussion to come back to the board, to have the board make that determination based on, say, life safety issues or based on agreements that if in the future we needed to move your new home that you brought in, you'd be amenable to us moving it. So I just think we need to have that discussion. I just want to see if it was okay for the board. I mentioned it to Phyllis before she went off on her vacation, so I just wanted to follow up with the board to see if that's something we could put on a future agenda.
That's fine, but I thought you brought that up a few weeks ago, and
Nothing's been done, so I just want to make sure.
We had a brief discussion in terms of why, at least it was staff's recommendation, why it would not be appropriate, why we were sort of in this early initial planning period, if you recall.
I don't recall that discussion,
Yeah,
so
I
maybe
mean-
I missed it, but I just don't want to put people's lives on hold for 2 to 3 years so we can make up our minds. I don't think that's fair. And if somebody wants to take the chance of moving in a new home and we say 2 years down the line, your house has to be moved, 4 blocks, down the road to our new site, that's in writing and they've agreed to it.
Well, again, we've had that discussion with John Peacock, and we can have that discussion again. And
do you remember did we have that and I missed it?
Right now, there's so many things, like some of the units being closer than 10 feet together, some being in the debris flow area.
Well, that's why we need to have the public safety
And
issue come back to us.
so having somebody bring in, I mean, if they're in the appropriate site and if they have the right clearances and everything.
It has to be a case-by-case determination,
Yeah,
but I didn't know
think we
we
kind of
discussed.
need more.
I'm happy to.
I talked to you, I don't think I
I
discussed.
think
happy
we
to
need
have
more
it,
of a
but we-
master plan, which is what we're working on.
But we're not gonna have a
any-
master plan for 2 to 3 years. Are we gonna put these people's lives on hold if they have the opportunity to upgrade their home to something that's better?
I don't think we should be arguing this here. If you want to have it on a future agenda, I'm supportive of
Thank
it.
you.
We can have that
End of
discussion,
story.
but we should have John Peacock
Steve's going for a
here.
master
We
plan.
could do a
Thank you,
case by
George.
case.
Put it on a future agenda. But there's plenty to talk about here, and I think, I don't think anybody's life is on hold. If anything, we've rescued them from being pushed out.
We're putting
sooner.
lives on hold.
So-
We're not gonna argue that here. George is absolutely right. Let's have a broader discussion
Right.
with information before us.
Okay, we'll bring that back. Steve?
Okay.
So at least 2 of us have had phone calls from Jim Markalunas regarding the letter he sent several weeks ago, which it's really an annual thing with him.
It's the same letter.
Concerned about his property taxes, and he feels like he's being pushed out of Aspen because his property tax is going up. So I just wanted to bring it up. He is aware of all of the homestead exemption kind of things, the different things that are available. This is all part of a much larger discussion about property taxes and property evaluation. And I'm sure there are probably other people on fixed incomes who are in a similar situation. And I don't know if we maybe want to put some thought to trying to come up with some solutions. I don't have any solution right now, but I wanted to put it on the table that
Rather than him always writing our letters, a letter to us, he should be writing his letter to CMC, to the school district, to the fire district, to the hospital district, because the bulk of his taxes are not being paid to Pickens County.
Plus, that's the same letter he wrote last year. He just crossed out the date, put a new date on it, which I appreciate. At least he reminded us. He has chosen not to take advantage of the state opportunities for reducing his property tax because of his position in the community. He's chosen not to do that. Those are things that he could do. He can appeal his property taxes. He could file an appeal. I don't think he does that. So there's other avenues he could prevail in, but he's chosen not to do that. So I don't know what more we can do. For us to change the valuation of his property tax because he's a senior, and he doesn't appeal it, would be a state legislative issue. And unless our county assessor wants to come to the table and propose that, that's kind of out of our hands.
Can we make sure she has this letter?
Yeah.
I just saw that Charlotte sent it to us.
That's a great idea.
Forward it to the assessor. Okay, thank you.
If I can get that from you, I'll get a copy of it.
And I think Larry Fite's probably addressed it in the past, so.
And I think, I think a nice letter from the assessor's office could be good to send to Jim, just explaining some of the different, one-page explanation of
I bet Larry Fite has one on file that he did
things.
last
He
year.
probably has one on file that would
We can
be,
certainly look at it.
And I don't know, I could know the copy of this that we got on May 7th, I think it was went to Charlotte, and then
Oh, okay, so we've got a record of
she
it already.
copied it
Okay,
to
all
the
right, okay.
commissioners.
Okay, we'll pull that up and
Yeah.
follow up
So
on
it's
it.
a one from Charlotte on May 7th.
All right, okay.
Kelly, did you have
yeah.
something? Okay.
Yeah, I want to bring up the topic of family leave, policy of family leave and personal family leave.
You ready to leave already?
Just got here.
Something coming up?
That corner over there.
Some things are imminent.
I've got it on
So-
speed dial on my phone here in case we need to move fast.
I do want to just bring up the policy of family leave since the family bill kind of, who knows what that future is going to look like. I want to touch base or have staff maybe touch base with us sometime in the future about what their leave policy discussions, where they're at, what they're thinking in light of the current
Our
conditions.
Our in-house.
Our in-house, yep.
I thought you were
As long as
talking
you're
about
back
your
on
house.
Tuesdays and Wednesdays.
In this house, yes,
Not
in
in
my
that-
house, yeah. And then I've just been giving some thought to, welcoming our new baby into our lives in the coming months, and what that means for me in terms of work attendance, and wanted to talk with you all, about what I'm thinking, and request your support for some alternatives, I guess. So, we're due July 9th. I'm guessing he's going to come a little early. Thinking back to first time around, I was practically anemic and really didn't feel well for the first couple of weeks. I just felt ill. And so for me, I'm requesting to probably not be here for about 6 weeks, with a little exception in there. There's important things happening in our summer agendas that I would like to continue to participate in. And I understand that this facility has the capabilities to call in and participate from off-site. And so I'd like to find out if you would support me in that. And then, seeing how we do and how I feel, will do my best to come in person as well. But that's kind of the framework that I'm anticipating for when
Great.
baby boy
I also
Curry
offered
arrives.
Kelly the opportunity, if one of the items on our agenda that I had to recuse from moves forward, and she would like to participate in that particular item in person, I will recuse myself to upstairs with baby in arms.
There you go.
So she can bring baby to me, and I will take baby upstairs.
And she's a nurse.
Yeah, no, I
and I'm
trust-
Granny Patty
Yeah, that's
to
right.
Bridget, so I'm Granny
There you
Patty
go.
to Aloysius.
And just moving forward, I may need to excuse myself when I'm, back working here, attending on a regular basis, just to, pump and that kind of stuff. That doesn't happen in 10
We
minutes.
can put a little crib over here in the corner.
You'll still be on grassroots, though, actually, with that. I think that's great.
Thank you, Kelly.
Thank you, and I'd be fine with call-in.
We need to talk to legal and find out from a voting standpoint if you do have to be present or not in the room. We can certainly check on that for you and see.
Yeah, I'd
rather outside.
Yeah,
Okay.
for sure.
Great. Thank you.
You could talk to Jill Ryan, because when she was elected commissioner, she was pregnant. And so her very first year as an Eagle County commissioner, she had,
Well, it's very
had
similar.
her baby. And I don't know what she did, but
Yeah.
it'd be worth probably shooting a letter over to the,
You can just ask Leslie Lamont in ComDev, because she did it twice.
Yeah.
Twice.
Great. Anything else from you?
No, thank
Okay.
you.
Rich, Kara's not here, so you're filling in for her. We had talked about requests that have come to us from the County Climate Coalition, or the Climate Coalition of Climate Counties, regarding signing on to their policy letter. Kara dug through the archives and found our policy, something that we could cobble together, and what she's looking for is direction that we would ask that she put together our
Our own
policy
letter?
We could easily sign on to theirs, which is very simple. I think it's probably come to us before, but someone suggested, maybe it was you last time, that we wanted to write our own letters. So she's got these. It's just a shame to have to write a new letter each time, so we're hoping we get one we can then use
Yeah,
for
and
everyone.
she could send us a copy, or somebody could send, not you, but send it through staff to get us a copy of the, or did you already send it to us?
I think we've already seen that, and it's basically reaffirming everything that we've been saying and doing so far. So I think that we just need to give Kara direction on that. Is that?
Yeah, she sent an email. She was unable to make it this afternoon, but she said that Pickens County has at least 7 existing resolutions on climate change dating back 15 years on the reduction of greenhouse gases by 2040. So our question to the board was, do you want to sign on to the county climate coalition? And do you want a specific resolution in joining the county climate coalition affirming commitment to the Paris Climate Agreement is kind of her question.
It's a little bigger than,
Right.
Yeah, it's
have to go back and review the Paris Climate Agreement.
That's a little bigger than just saying, are we still members? Are we being asked to be a member again and pay a dues, or is that part of this?
I
or-
don't think that's part of
This is a
it. It's
different-
just signing on to a letter.
We signed on as partners last time. I'd just like to see something this time, I think.
Greg, do you have the
broader
letter,
we're
the copy
going,
of the
or-
letter? That maybe
I don't
we
have a
can-
hard copy. I probably have
Okay.
it in the email. I think it's probably in all of our emails from a week or two
I
ago.
didn't,
Okay.
But I've sent it for, I forwarded it on to Kara at least. We
Okay.
can dig it up
No.
and I'll share it with you.
Greg, just for, is this the Colorado Coalition
This is,
that Aspen's started?
no,
Or is this something?
this is something else.
Something
This is
different?
yet another
This
one.
is,
Bigger nationwide
Yeah, she-
coalition of counties? There is something to that effect too.
I
So
think this is the, yeah,
that
this is
from
the one
them?
that Aspen started.
Yeah, Kara described it as a county climate coalition initiative by the Climate Reality Project, an activist coalition that was founded by Al Gore. Denver and Boulder County have signed on.
that's a little
And they're
broad. I wasn't
requesting-
even familiar with that at all.
Yeah, they're requesting the county join in.
Right, okay.
It's just
we're not-
basically the county making a statement on climate change.
If we could provide our own letter, that would be great. I'd say we'd send them that and be done with it.
Okay.
If they want us to sign on theirs, then they have to review the Paris Climate Accord, and
Okay,
I'm not ready to do that right now.
all right.
So there's that one. The next one is CC4CA requested a letter thanking Carrie Donovan, Senator Donovan, if we would sign on to their letter. The question did come up as whether or not we want to single her out for the things she did with signing that, or do we just, would she prefer?
Does she
we
want
can-
that attention?
Does she want that attention? I'd love to be able to have us say, yes, we'll sign on, but let's check with her first. Can we do that? Is that George nodding yes? So make sure it's something that she wants, right, before we do it. I'm assuming Jacob
Yeah.
did that, but, so that's signing on to this thank you letter to Carrie Donovan. That's the second one. Let's see, other issues that came up, we've got, there's another trash cleanup on June 1st. I wanted to point out, anybody in the community can join that one with Eric Scarvin's putting that on. It'll be in the newspaper. I wanted to say that the teen mental health program put together by Jillian Livingston at the District Theater last night was very well attended. They had law enforcement, they had mental health agencies, they had parents, they had first-person stories from kids in our community who'd had troubles with drugs and alcohol abuse. We had the emergency room doctor from VVH. And the most poignant thing, important thing she said was, one, she thinks the exception for her is finding a kid who is not smoking marijuana. And the second thing was that virtually every time she's in the ER, she has a kid in there with a crisis. It's down to that. She says it is certainly an issue that's getting worse, and I think we're all working to address that, but it was an eye-opener to have the ER doc tell us that pretty blatant, brazenly. I want to remind everybody, once again, on May 24th, Colorado River District is bringing the Cloud Seeding Roadshow to us. They're bringing in scientists from NCAR and other people to speak. There'll be panel discussions. It's in this room on the 24th, Friday, from 12 p.m. Sack lunch, bring your own sack lunch, to roughly 4 p.m. in the afternoon. Presentations and panel discussions to bring us up to speed on what's happening there.
And it'll be taped, so. those
It
of
will
us
be
who-
taped by Grassroots, yep. And then from there, that's all I've got. And if we move right into board membership reports,
I'll start.
you can start, and then we can bring up the rest about what Colorado River District and Roundtable were talking about yesterday.
The Northwest COG meeting is on Thursday in Breckenridge, so I'll be going over there. It's a rural resort. It's not RRR anymore. It's the workforce region. We're meeting tomorrow here at 9:30. We just have just some of the members, because Pickens County's always left out of the workforce loop, and we're wondering why we're sitting in the table, other than the fact that we're required to be there by state statute. So that's the meeting will be tomorrow. ACRA meeting next month. At the ACRA meeting, we're going to present the Basalt Vista project.
Oh, good.
We have somebody
Great.
coming from Habitat. a member of the board, of the ACRA board, Sam, who was here today, he wanted to do the net zero portion of it, but CORE was already there and discussed it at length. So we're gonna do the whole process of how we came to be partners and how well the partnership has worked and where the project is going and how to use that as a template for other private-public partnerships. So that'll be at the RAFTA meeting in June.
ACRA.
I mean, the ACRA meeting. And then the Healthy Forest Collaborative is still on the list, and it needs to be taken off because it doesn't exist anymore.
We should try to remove that.
The other thing, and Kelly went to the meeting on Thursday because I was busy having a baby. The Basalt Child Care Coalition, I think they were going to have a presentation from Rocky Mountain. Were they there? No. I've encouraged them from the Rocky Mountain Child Care Coalition to meet together and talk about the new state statute that allows them to create special districts for child care funding. And so hopefully we'll work on that. Other than that, those are my updates.
That's you, George. Do you want to
Say healthy forest.
Where are we?
Core? What's
Core, we're continuing our work on our strategic plan. We're looking at actually changing our mission statement and our vision statement because it's now been 20 years. And there's a lot has happened since it was first incepted, the inception of CORE. So that's what we're doing. We're working on our strategic plan.
Excellent. I noticed on that topic of re-updating and figuring out what's next, AVLT's had a big push to do a survey to engage the community in their plan. And I'm just wondering, is this just the core board or is there an outreach beyond?
This is just a core board. Yeah.
I can't wait to see what comes out of it.
Yeah.
Okay. RAFTA, you've been at RAFTA most recently.
Again, it seems to be the time for retreats and strategic planning. So RAFTA will have our annual retreat, I think, next month, and we're looking at some strategic planning, which includes autonomous buses and how RAFTA can continue to become a green organization.
Great. I remember in correspondence with Dan and Jason most recently, I had a discussion with them that I'll probably be bringing up at the retreat on dogs on buses, on certain buses at certain times. We have a large number of dog owners in the valley who can't use RAFTA. They might be able to access it on occasional, periods on occasional buses. That I'm going to bring that forward again, and as well, there's some other innovative bicycle transport mechanisms that might be worth looking at.
Yeah, hopefully that won't be at our retreat, but I would encourage you to do that at our regular board meeting, Greg.
Oh, really?
And get that on the agenda.
Do it
because
beforehand.
the retreat has been put together by a subcommittee.
So it's already full. Huh, it's funny, he said bring it up at the retreat.
Well, you could try bring it up, but I
We'll
think
see what
it's
happens.
probably more appropriate for a regular
For a
board
regular
discussion.
meeting. Okay, well, I'll do that.
Can I also elevate a topic that I brought up prior to running for office with RAFTA was the potential for allowing strollers in the handicap seat locations when there are not riders with disabilities that need those locations, because you're often made to sort of break down entire apparatus, which can be very cumbersome when you have a baby in a car seat that's connected to a stroller and your groceries and all that stuff. So I don't know.
Right. Well,
You
we'll
could
put
raise
that into the
that.
hopper. Great.
Yeah, we got
I'll
strollers.
walk in with a long
we got
list.
strollers, we got dogs, we got
Dogs and strollers.
lots of
of
people want to
riders.
utilize
Yeah, it's a
RAFTA
good
buses,
problem
which
to
is
More the
great.
merrier. More the
Yeah.
merrier.
And living in Burlingame, there's a big demand for that on our
Right.
buses.
That's right. Okay, what's happening with the Nordic Council?
Well, we may still be skiing here.
Exactly.
We're shut down for the year. It's a great year.
Okay, what's next? Steve, are you up for?
No, George was the Intermountain TPR. George, how are you spending all
sorry.
that money?
We haven't had a meeting in a while, so there's nothing to do
Nothing
an
to
update.
report.
Does well, there was an article that came out, I think, yesterday that said CDOT is doing a public outreach process and all of the county, or they're going to be embarking on one in all of the counties on projects. Would that affect the TPR at all?
It probably will when it comes back to our region to see what the results are.
I didn't see
But
that.
pretty much the list has been sort of prioritized right now. But it's always good to see what other needs communities will have.
Okay, CC4CA.
Let's go back to the beginning. Are we going back to the beginning?
Back to the beginning of
No, QQ.
There will be the
QQ. Sorry,
retreat.
I'm
on-
sorry. QQ.
QQ, we meet
Coming up
next
soon.
week.
Next week.
No, June something,
Yeah.
2 weeks.
So nothing to report there. CCI.
CCI will be meeting on June 3rd, 4th, and 5th in Frisco for the summer meeting.
4th and 5th. Got it. Okay.
And we'll both be there, and I know Nan always goes.
Yeah.
And John Peacock's
John
speaking,
will-
I think.
John will probably be there. One of the things, I'm gonna moderate a discussion on aging well communities in Colorado that will feature Larimer County, and Fort Collins will tell about their experience with it. And there'll be people from AARP and from my SAPCA committee will also be on the panel.
Okay. Club 19.
Club 19, Club 20 is meeting here. I found the dates finally. In the town of Snowmass Village at the Stonebridge Inn on July 11th and 12th will be the policy committees for telecom, healthcare, business affairs, transportation, tourism, and outdoor recreation. And then on July 25th and 26th in Pagosa Springs will be agriculture, water, public lands, and natural resources and energy.
What date was the Pagosa Springs?
That's July 25th and 26th.
COG meetings.
So right before the Mountain Fair.
Right before it is right before Mountain Fair.
Okay, Steve, what else you got?
Let's see, Senior Council didn't have a meeting this month. The meeting date occurred when the Senior Services was holding the listening sessions on the Aging Well Plan. And so I think pretty much all of the Senior Council members attended one or more of the meetings which were held in the Basalt Library and the Pickens County Library. And I think those were pretty well attended and had pretty good discussion and input to Chad and his staff.
Steve took me to lunch at the senior center last week. That was a highlight of my week.
He pay?
He did pay. So I was his guest. I wasn't allowed to go in without his chaperone.
You missed, what is CRR?
That's the Colorado River Roundtable.
To be determined.
Yeah, exactly. And Kelly and I met there yesterday. I think the most significant thing that came, that we saw, were they had some grants come through. But the thing that was most significant to me was that they have a demand management presentation slideshow that they're putting together that anyone, any member could take out and use to talk about what demand management is. And there was a vigorous, interesting discussion around that from some people who thought it was not objective enough. Others, the devil's in the details on that. So the slideshow doesn't seem like it's quite ready for prime time yet. But it will talk about demand management, and then it will talk about the climate drought mitigation plan.
Drought contingency plan.
Drought contingency plan, of which the three, one of the three categories in that for their drought contingency plan, as we've all heard now, is cloud seeding. So all of a sudden, it's on their radar as a way they can do drought contingency, and that and pulling water from other reservoirs and doing some shuffling shell games with reservoir water. And then, what was the third one? I'll dig it out.
Greg, I have a request about cloud seeding. Would you stop? Because we have enough.
Well, the drought contingency plans have now, I think yesterday, been signed by the president, with the upper and lower basin states having finalized their drought contingency plans. And then those went through Congress and as of yesterday are now signed. And, the lower basin has one approach. They have very specific metrics for how they will reduce water, which states will reduce water when. The upper basin does not. We have this stool of 3 things that the upper basin will consider trying to meet their requirements for any allocation of water to Lake Powell, demand management being one of them, cloud seeding being the other, and then I forget what the third is. You have that right in front of you.
I've got, yeah.
But
So-
kind of 3 tools for how Colorado would meet its obligation to send water down to Lake Powell. And so this presentation was focusing on the demand management tool, which then became clear that not everybody necessarily supports demand management as a tool or an approach. And you know what our roundtable is trying to do is get ahead of the conversation of what a demand management tool might look like, it's voluntary, compensated, and temporary are kind of the 3 qualities of a demand management tool. And so they're trying to get ahead of that conversation of what in Colorado might a demand management program look like, what are all the questions to be considered, what might it cost, who would be interested in doing it, is it truly voluntary, which would be necessary to avoid the state engineer from coming in with mandated curtailments for people.
How do they keep the accounting on it? And finally, there's talk of a 500,000 acre foot demand management pool in Lake Powell.
Right, whether it be at the bottom or the top.
Right.
Right, and where it comes from and how do you account for it? How does a rancher who donates some of his water,
How does he get credit for
how
that
does he get credit
pool?
for that? So there are a lot of more questions than answers on it, but the slideshow is evolving. I just suggest that they put a lot more question marks on it.
I think it'd be a great presentation for our board to.
Yeah, no, we'll bring it
whether
back.
Greg and I feel comfortable enough. 'cause
We
there's
will the
lots
next
of
time they get it,
underlying
when they have it
concerns and
ready.
questions. Or we invite someone from the River District to do it, but maybe something for the future.
I think they're trying to train us to send us out to do it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, from there, moving right along, RWAPA, I don't think there's anything new to report from RWAPA. Our next meeting will be soon, but there's nothing here now. We've got CC4CA, we've talked about their letter. Is there anything else we wanted?
Yes, so CC4CA is kind of, they're not restructuring, they're kind of realigning their timing for electing representation within the CC4CA membership to align with the retreat. So our kind of year for CC4CA is going to run July through June. And so at our retreat in June, we'll confirm what the policy agenda is and policy statements are on specific topics within the climate crisis world. So we haven't changed that second C from change to crisis, but that's the trend, right? So, and then they've presented a slate of candidates for what that representation is. So there's a president, a vice president, a steering committee chair, a steering committee vice chair. The difference between those roles is the president and vice president are kind of the public serving lobbying face for the organization and PR face for the organization from our membership. And the steering committee chair and vice chair are the decision-making boards about, health of the organization, policies, and anything that might divert from current policies. So they've presented a slate of, for president, Jamie Harkins from Lafayette, who is the mayor, vice president, Erica Sparhawk from Carbondale, steering committee chair, Susie Strife from Boulder, and vice chair, Kristen Bertuglia from Vail. We don't know the results of that. It seems like via email there's a lot of support for that slate, but they tried to balance Front Range and West Slope representation. So that's it.
Okay, CCCC, Compact for Colorado Communities, that's the Aspen-initiated group.
We just talked about, wasn't it?
No, that was CC4CA. This is triple C.
Wasn't that the one, the Colorado County Compact, Colorado Community Compact?
No,
wasn't
the Al
it?
Gore one, I think
The Al
is
Gore one was
national.
Colorado
Oh, yeah, but it
Coalition.
was
The letter we were
Spin-off.
talking about is a different
I
organization.
think we should stop using Cs in any
Well,
of these.
I'm staying out of it.
We did get
Give
a
up.
recent email. Ashley Pearl is like the head contact for that right now. And they did have a meeting early in May, and about half of the communities who had signed up were at that meeting, and they were asking that everybody who didn't attend it to contact them with what our plans, what actions are we taking, that kind of thing. So I will look into that more and maybe talk to Kara about that and see, so we could respond to that.
Okay, Colorado Commissioners acting together, Ccap.
Ccap is meeting on right after the CCI conference. Ccap's having the annual retreat, also in Keystone, for July 5th and June 5th and 6th.
Okay. Yeah, I've got letters regarding our climate policy with Kara, since it just popped up, going back to the Kyoto Protocol, and I think we're just gonna have to pick it up again when she gets back in. We'll forward something that we can all contemplate. That's it. The final item has been canceled this week, off the agenda this week. This is Ann and the Finance Treasurer report. We'll get that in a future meeting. So I think we're done here.
I have a
Any other
quick question.
comments?
The board doesn't need to do, is it EAP or what's the new computer program? we have? We don't need to do that training, right? They keep threatening me with, you're not signed up for training.
No, you do not have to worry about that.
Yeah.
Just want to make sure I'm not in trouble again.
No.
George, you're in trouble though.
I never did the other training way back when, whatever that was.
That was the sexual harassment.
Somebody
in the
mute his
workplace.
mic over there.
It's even before that.
Okay, we're off grassroots. Thank you.
All right, thanks. Thanks, everyone. Tomorrow.